I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any opening public comment from the board this evening? I would just like to make one comment. I want to thank the Spy Tones yesterday for a wonderful concert at the town gazebo, a benefit for the Boys and Girls Club. Thank everybody for coming by and showing their support. It was a great evening of music, and it was a good way to cap off a week or a summer of Monday music. Hopefully we'll be able to do that again next year as well, but again, it was a fun night, and it was for a good cause for the Boys and Girls Club of Lunenburg, so thank you. Any public comment from the public? Seeing none. So, this evening we're going to start with candidates for election officers, is that correct?
Yes.
So we have candidates for election officers, warden, deputy warden, clerk, deputy clerk, 2 inspectors, and 2 deputy inspectors.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ebersol.
In light of the potential conflict for the warden position, I'd ask if you separate out the discussion on that versus the other officers. I would have to recuse myself for discussion under the warden position due to the compensation paid for that position.
Okay, so we can take them, I guess we can take them all except for warden?
That'd be correct.
You might want to do warden and deputy warden.
That would be fine. Yep.
Why don't we start with warden, see what happens.
Okay, let's start with warden.
Mr. Chairman, I hereby recuse myself from the discussion for the warden discussion. I will be leaving my chair and return after whatever action this board takes.
Okay, thank you. Who are we interviewing for warden?
Well, why don't I just review the process quickly? So you had requested that I send letters to both the chair of the Democratic Town Committee and the Republican Town Committee requesting their nominations for appointment to the positions that you previously mentioned. I did receive a letter back from each of the chairs of the committees, and also included on the list people currently serving in the positions, because there was some confusion. I only received one name from the Democratic Committee chair, which was a nomination. Let's see, of Troy Daniels for election warden, and then the Republican Committee chair submitted a letter stating that he had a list of candidates on file with the town clerk's office, which I confirmed with the town clerk were the same people that had been previously in those positions. So from the Republican Town Committee for warden, the committee is submitting the name of Janice Carrier, for deputy warden the name of Edward Harriman, and for inspector L. Grace Harriman, and deputy inspector Ann Shattuck. And I did just want to mention that both Mr. and Mrs. Harriman, I was advised they're not here this evening because they are on vacation out of state.
Okay. So we have, just so I get this correct, so for the warden, we have 2 nominees?
You have a nominee from the Republican Town Committee of Janice Carrier, and from the Democratic Town Committee, Troy Daniels.
Okay. And I see Mr. Daniels here is Miss...
Yes.
Yes, in the back. Okay, so why don't we... it doesn't matter to me which one we start with. So, as the incumbent, Ms. Carrier. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, can you tell us a little bit about, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, even though the people on the board know you. And also about how long you've been serving in the election process.
Let's see. 49 years. I've worked at the polls most of the time. I live in town. I've lived here for 60 some odd years. And I work at the Conservation Commission. What else would you like to know? I will not tell you my age.
Oh, luckily, I don't ask that. As an interview process, we always ask people to just tell a little bit about themselves. Because like I said, even though the board may know the candidates, people at home may not, so. And you would like to continue to serve, I'm assuming, since you are here tonight?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Anybody on the board have questions?
Just quickly, there's been some issues raised with how the elections were run. And I understand you've been made aware of those, and just curious how you're going to address any specifics that come forth from the Secretary of State, things we need to do differently at the elections.
We just follow the rules. We have the books there with us. We go by, chapters 50 to 57 or 58 or something. And if there's any question of anything, we look it up. We don't go off the top of our heads. Otherwise, some of them we have all memorized, the laws, so we follow things very closely and keep a watch on people, and just what we've always done.
Anybody else?
For the folks at home, could you briefly tell us what the warden does as compared to a deputy warden or a clerk? Or
I'm basically in charge of the election process, the ballots, the voting lists. The town clerk oversees everything, but if there's a problem, they come to me. If there's a problem with the ballot boxes, I check the ballot boxes and make sure they're running properly, and the town clerk does all the testing ahead of time. If there's problems outside, I handle that. And nobody gives me any trouble.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
George?
as I'm sure you're aware, there has been a complaint filed relative to the practices of the last election, and I guess and I know I'm sort of putting you on the spot, but I would like to know from your perspective if any violation occurred, and what you foresee, and it kind of is tied to Mr. Matthews' question, is what you see moving forward as practices at the polls that may or may not change.
I cannot see that there were any violations according to the laws. The Secretary of State, I think, has contacted Kathy. I don't know. I don't know what the outcome is there. They didn't contact me. I don't think we'd do anything different, be more cognizant of the laws and the rules, but we follow them now, so I don't think there'd be any change. Doing it like we've done for the last umpteen years since I've been there.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Daniels,
Good evening.
again, the same thing, if you would introduce yourself.
Troy Daniels. I served on the Board of Health in Lunenburg. I recently ran for the town clerk's position. Lived in Lunenburg with my partner of 15 years, who was a townie, I guess. My background, I studied undergrad at Suffolk University, and that's what brought me to the Massachusetts area, and moved to Lunenburg about 4 years ago and remodeled our home, family home that's been in the family for nearly 60 years. Part of the core of my being is that I feel that justice is important, that fairness is important, that equity is important, and that's really who I am and what I believe. And I think that one of the things that became apparent to me was that in this last election that I participated in, that there were issues, and that whenever there were challenges brought to the law, I didn't feel, or challenges or notes brought to the town election officials, that they were addressed appropriately and that people were treated fairly. And I did report the violations, and they're still under investigation as far as I've been aware, and I've actually been referred to the State Ethics Commission to file an additional complaint. So I also believe that there should be choices, and that this is a democratic process, that you as a board have choices, people of the town have choices, and unless somebody steps forward and offers themselves for these positions, then we don't have the choice. And so that's what I'm here to do tonight, is to offer you a choice and a town a choice. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Questions for Mr. Daniels from the board? Ms. Bertram?
Thank you. Can you highlight what you see as issues and what changes you would make moving forward at the polls this past year?
Well, as I said, there's investigation ongoing with the Secretary of State's office and with the State Ethics Commission, so I really can't comment on what that outcome will be or what they might say, or all the information was submitted to them.
Okay.
So I don't know what their ruling will be. So I don't know. I can't speak to how it should be changed. I can tell you what was observed, and well, I really can't tell you about that, but I can tell you that my perception is that things needed to be done differently. What was written in the law and what happened. And unfortunately, whenever you talk about doing it the same way for 49 years, unfortunately, the law has changed in the last 49 years, within the last 49 years, within the last 30 years, within the last 15 years. And there's reasons why those laws are put into place. It's because the conduct that took place in the past is perceived to be wrong and need to be avoided, and goes back to the justice and the fairness and equity in elections. And that's why, that's how I would change it, I suppose.
Anyone else? Thank you. I want to take this moment for a second to say that, first of all, we are under state obligation to appoint by the 15th, correct?
Yes.
Of August. So we will, the Secretary of State investigation notwithstanding, we are still going to be appointing people under that statute, so we don't lose the authority to do it. And then whatever comes of that investigation, we will treat on the other side. But I just wanted people to be aware that these proceedings are going on, and we will be appointing people with full awareness of what the investigation is that's been filed, and with full understanding about what the law requires us to do as far as appointments. So, second, do we have nominations for every one of these individually, or do people submit these as a pool that they want to be? Like, does somebody apply specifically for warden and specifically for deputy warden, or are people applying?
The only nomination that was submitted by the Democratic Town Committee was Mr. Daniels for warden. I did include on the invitation list for the meeting tonight people who had previously served in that position. And the Republican Town Committee resubmitted the same list of people who have been serving. So hopefully that makes sense to you.
No, I understand. I understand that. I just was asking, so they made it on a job description level. So somebody applied, they nominated people for warden, and so not to be an appointed election official where we can say, okay, we want to put people in certain positions. I'm just concerned about what flexibility we have or not before we go any further. So I'm clear, and so everybody on the board is clear.
The request that was made to each of the chairmen was for them to submit a list of enrolled members who desire appointment to election offices, to appointment as election officers. The Democratic Town Committee submitted, as I mentioned, Mr.
name,
Daniels
right.
for warden. The Republican Town Committee Chair said his list was on file with the town clerk's office, and what is on file with the town clerk's office is by specific title.
So by law, is there an opportunity for anyone to stand for the positions other than what's been nominated by the committees?
This is not my area of expertise. I can look through Mass General Law. What my understanding from reading it previously was that the committees recommended, that it
Okay.
wasn't an open, that you went through the committee. People who were interested in appointment went through either of the committees.
Okay. With that guidance, we have two nominees for warden that we've interviewed, so I would entertain a motion from the board, or comments or further discussion.
I would say that I have every faith that if the Secretary of State comes back with a finding that's negative to the operations of the town elections this past time through, I fully expect that Janice Carrier will implement whatever comes back as being proven as what should happen. So based on that and my faith in her, I would recommend that I would nominate Jan Carrier for the election warden position.
And I would second that.
Is there any further discussion on the nominee? I want to thank both people before we even take a vote on coming forward. Again, I think Mr. Daniels said it about it being about choices, and so it's always beneficial for us as a board and beneficial for the town when multiple people apply for the same positions, no matter what the position is, so that we do have people coming forward. So I want to thank both of you for that. And regardless of who gets the position or not, we want to be able to fill people in other positions with their interests. So that being said, any further discussion? I heard none. All those in favor of the reappointment of Ms. Carrier to the position of warden, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Matthews.
I also wish we had some choice here, and I would actually like to have an opportunity to see Mr. Daniels, since he could bring some new ideas and a different approach, and could collaborate with the other members of the election force. That I would very much like to be able to see him go in as or be nominated for vice chair.
Deputy warden.
Deputy warden, sorry. But it would appear we don't have that
Well,
opportunity.
I don't
or
know.
no?
Well, again, I don't know that it's clear who got appointed to what, and the first thing I want people involved who want to be involved, and that's important process of this. So the first question I would ask, and I think we have some latitude, I believe. So, I mean, the responses from the town committee chairs were vague and nebulous at best, not responding and saying that they're in file with the town clerk, and then one person giving we asked them for a nomination for 8 positions and we get one name, is not helpful to them, it's not helpful to us, and I'm interested not in their committees on either side. I'm interested in what's best, I think, for the town as a whole, and getting new people in as well who want to be involved. So I think we have some latitude. I would ask Mr. Daniels if he is interested before we proceed in being deputy warden or applying for that.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Bertram.
I am also disappointed by the lack of response from both the Democratic and Republican committees. I think that we do need to have a slate, and I think that, as you stated, to simply say it's on file is not sufficient, and to give one name when there are 8 names is absolutely unresponsive as far as I'm concerned. I do believe that we do have a deputy warden, and while I'm certainly willing to entertain that, I think we've got to give that deputy warden an opportunity to also talk about this. And since we're given the time crunch we're under of August 15th, I'm concerned about whether or not that Mr. Harriman is present and can speak, because I'm not sure what our latitude is, but I also don't want to take someone out of a position that has been doing it for a number of years for the town, and as far as I'm concerned, doing it well, without giving them an opportunity to speak. So I'm concerned about the process here.
While I understand that, August 15th is August 15th, and that's one deadline that I know if we don't take action, then the nomination goes to whom
To
again?
the Board of Registrars.
So the Board of Registrars gets to appoint somebody. So
Then-
all we'd be doing is abrogating our responsibility to appoint somebody.
Then I would ask if the individuals who are slated, whose names are currently in existence, were they advised of this hearing tonight?
Yes, they were, and
So
and I
everyone
believe
was-
they are all here except for Mr. and Mrs. Harriman, who had a previously scheduled vacation out of state.
Okay. Do you have any idea how long Mr. Harriman has served in this position?
I don't, but I bet Jan does. No, you don't, or so, no.
Well, I'm going to ask you to come, just so people at home can hear you.
Just a point of information that the deputy warden has to be opposite of the party that I serve.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
okay? I hesitated to say that because clearly that has not been true. Because the deputy warden is also from the same party as you.
Oh.
And I would say that that would be a reason why I'd want the other party in there, that the two positions should be different. And I didn't want to make it sound overtly political, but it makes sense to me that those two positions, the warden and deputy warden, should come from opposite parties. So I'm glad to hear you say that. And
I'm almost positive they're supposed to.
well, even if they're
the way I always
not
understood it.
required to be, it makes sense that they should be.
And the other thing is, Troy, I don't think you're registered as a Democrat.
I believe it's unenrolled. and
Yes.
I went from Democrat unenrolled.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that raises the question, if the designation is unenrolled, is that sufficient for the requirements? And it does make sense to me, hearing both of you say it, that one be a Republican, one be a Democrat. It absolutely makes sense.
It's confusing in the general laws because it does say that 2 election offices can be unenrolled. But as you go down the line of election offices, I don't know whether they're referring to the deputy inspectors or the tellers or what they are. It's very confusing, the general laws on that.
I can't answer questions on election law. It's not
What is the
something
general law? What is the citing? Do we know?
We don't have it for what we're talking about now. We don't have it in front of us right now. But I think that the general, again, if I were to employ common sense, it would say that the warden and deputy warden shouldn't be of the same party. If one is one party and one is unenrolled, I don't know that they have to be on opposite parties. They just can't be in the same party. Would make sense.
You're implementing common sense with
Well, that's
politics.
that's what I have to go on tonight because we don't have an election law, expert here in town hall with us.
Okay, excuse me, it says within each precinct, the election officers must equally represent the 2 leading political parties. However, 2 of the offices in each precinct may be unenrolled. It doesn't say, but a warden isn't assigned to a precinct in our polls.
Right.
Because they're all in one.
Well, everything's all in one, right? We don't assign, none of these officials are by precinct.
Does
Okay.
it specify the designation of deputy warden and warden?
Guys, I'm reading without my reading glasses. The warden and deputy warden must be from the same party, but different from that of the clerk and deputy clerk. So, okay,
They'd have to be
that's,
from the same.
Okay, well,
Well,
that's
there you
different.
go.
Even see a deputy
Yeah.
clerk.
That's different. No more than half the inspectors may be from the same party. Party representation requirements apply only if the chairman of the city or town committee of each political party or the chairman of the state committee of such party files with the registrar's list of enrolled members of the party who desire appointment as election officers. So they have to be enrolled members of,
So who nominates the unenrolled? If there's room for 2 unenrolled?
I don't know. Haven't got to that part.
Okay, so it says they must be of the same party, so
Okay,
then we don't really,
have a discussion.
right, we don't really have a discussion.
I have a question. Did the law,
Well, say it at the microphone, please.
can she just repeat the part of the law where it talked about the warden and the town clerk being of the same party? Was there, because I got confused about that piece of the law.
No, the warden and deputy warden must be from the same party and different from that of the clerk and deputy clerk
Okay.
of the election, and not town clerk.
Okay. That's where I got confused.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Based on that, I would nominate Edward Harriman for the deputy warden.
Have a
Second.
second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Mr. Harriman is reappointed. Will you be joining us? For clerk,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ebersol.
For the purposes of the record, I'm ending my recusal and returning to the meeting.
Thank you. For clerk, Ms. Kathleen Pliska.
You want me to tell something?
Yeah,
about-
just,
I'm
right.
Kathleen Plisker. I'm a lifelong resident of Lunenburg. I'm a retired educator. I've served on the Board of Trustees of what was the Ritter Memorial Library. I volunteered over at the Eagle House. I have in the past. I've delivered Meals on Wheels, excuse me, as well as worked in the Hit and Miss Bakery that they had going on at one time. My family has been in politics in this town since the 40s, and currently I work at the polls, and I've done that for approximately 8 years.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? No. Entertain a motion from the board.
I would make a motion to appoint Kathleen Pliska as clerk.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. Also for clerk, oh, this is deputy clerk, I'm sorry. Ms. Darlene Steele, who is not here. Would entertain a motion from the board or comments or something from the board?
Move that we appoint Darlene Steele as deputy clerk.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Ms. Steele is reappointed. Inspector, Ms. Ellen Aubuchon.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Ellen Aubuchon. I've lived in town for 44 years. I'm a retired educator like Kathy. Worked in the town of Lunenburg as an educator for a time. I'm currently retired. I work at the hospital in Leominster as a pastoral care minister. I also work at the polls. I've done that for about 8 years, and numerous volunteer activities within the community.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? I entertain a motion from the board.
I would make a motion to appoint Ellen Aubuchon as inspector.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Inspector Ernest Aubuchon.
My name's Ernest Aubuchon. Been a resident of Lunenburg for 44 years, according to my wife's count anyway, so I'll agree with that. Former educator also, retired 10 or so years ago, and currently am working as a part-time registered nurse. Have been volunteering or working the polls, I should say, for I believe the last 4 years.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Aubuchon? I'd entertain a motion.
Move that we appoint Ernest Aubuchon as Deputy Inspector.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Thank you. Inspector, okay, so we, Ms. Harriman, what?
Oh, I was just mentioning, you have 2 inspectors and 2 deputies.
Right, right. So another inspector, but Ms. Harriman is of course on vacation, as town manager has noted. So I would entertain a motion on,
Move that we appoint L. Grace Harriman as Inspector.
Second?
any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None. And Deputy Inspector Ms. Ann Shattuck.
My name is Ann Shattuck. I've lived here in Lunenburg for 60 years or thereabouts. My family's been here since we came, some member of the family. I'm retired. I currently am the present regent of the Captain John Jocelyn Jr. chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. I belong to the Women's Club in Lunenburg. And let's see what else. I'm a grandma. A very happy
Save the
grandma.
best for last.
That's the most
Yes.
important one. Huh?
Any questions from the board? I'd entertain a motion on Ms. Shattuck and the Deputy Inspector position.
I would make a motion to appoint Ann Shattuck as Deputy Inspector.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Matthews.
just want to thank all these folks for serving the town at these elections. I know it's a long, long day they put in for us, and you see them, you go in the morning, they're there, in the afternoon, they're smiling, they're happy, and they're doing a great job for us. I want to thank them all for their time and their service.
I want to thank them too, and I want to thank all the applicants, and I also want to note that these positions, if people are watching at home and have every season of our DVD collection at home, we have never appointed these before. And this was brought to our attention, and that's why we're coming in at such a late hour. So I promise that next year that these will be much, much further forward, so we can actually engage the town chairman of their respective committees, so we can get nominations without having to bump up against the deadline like this year. So I apologize for any confusion that caused and any disarray that might have caused. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just verifying it is a one-year term?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, one other point, as we get into the rhythm of doing this going forward, a great number of people in this town are unenrolled. I'm one of them.
I'm one too.
Prefer to
So
vote
am
for
I.
people than letters. So I really think we need to flesh out the process, better understand,
Right.
Fully how these appointments are made and what the opportunities are for unenrolled folks to get involved as well.
I agree. And that is no comment on the people who are doing such a good job. It's
No.
not about that. It's just about getting other people involved who may want to be involved.
Exactly.
So thank you. Okay. Which do you want to go first? The pilot? Okay. Because we have our town council here, we want to take care of the pilot agreement for New Gen for a second. So, Mr. Holland, Welcome back.
Hi, folks. Well done on the earlier matter. So this is the pilot agreement with Nugent. You'll remember we have 2 solar facilities, one at Chase Road and the other with EPG Solar. Tonight's pilot is with Nugent. The pilot is for 20 years. It is equal in term as the power purchase agreement, which the board signed with Nugent recently. And so the 2 documents, the 2 agreements are coterminous. The pilot is for personal property taxes only. The real estate is going to be taxed as it would normally be taxed in the ordinary course in the absence of a pilot. The amount is as set forth in the town meeting vote. It's $18,818 and some cents per megawatt per year. You'll recall that the power purchase agreement contemplates a 3-megawatt facility. It may be smaller than that. If it is built out to 3.1, that's going to be approximately $58,336 a year under the pilot. And so that's what we have. The agreement's been negotiated and is before the board.
So I would ask, has everybody had a chance to review it? It was all supplied to us. It is what we had talked about. And the last piece, of course, as Mr. Holland noted, was that the property will be taxed annually from the Board of Assessors. This is just for the power and personal property portion. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? Okay. And everybody received this filing too about what the property taxes are.
Well, I had some questions about the property taxes, but that's separate from this at this point, so.
That is true. So let's entertain a motion on the pilot agreement first.
Make a motion to approve the pilot agreement as written?
With Nugent, okay.
With Nugent, yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or any further questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Bertram?
I just want to make one comment, and that is, I was not privy to the last discussion because I was not at the meeting relative to the pilot, but I did have an opportunity to read it, and while I support the pilot, I know we're moving forward with an intermunicipal agreement, but I remain concerned about when we're going to execute that and making sure that that's in place sooner rather than later, and I just want to make that comment.
We do have a draft intermunicipal agreement that has been reviewed with the town of Townsend. Their Board of Selectmen, I've been advised, doesn't meet in the month of August.
Oh.
You can imagine that, so it is scheduled. That's a foreign concept to us. But, I do expect that it'll be taken up at the beginning of September.
Okay. You had a question, Mr. Matthews, also.
Just on the real estate taxes, as I'm looking at this small spreadsheet we have, and it seems, as I'm reading it, it seems the assessed value for the prime solar site, the 10 acres, is at $25,000 per acre, which is the same across if it's a developed solar site or if it's Chapter 61A, 61B, or 61. And that doesn't make sense to me at all.
So the site itself is 110 acres. As you mentioned, 10 acres of the 110 are being developed. So those developed acres are not eligible to have that
Okay, so they wouldn't be in chapter.
designation.
Right. Gotcha.
Right.
And that's, I mean, that's still a low rate. I mean, a residential land was going to be higher than that, so I'm not, I guess it's more a question for the assessors. But
Yeah, I think that would be a question for
it just seems like a very low value on what's going to produce some significant revenue for the developer. You know, it's significantly lower than what the similar acreage would be for residential. and I'm not quite sure I
Well,
understand.
we have a single tax rate, so it shouldn't matter. Land is
Tax
land.
rate, but the valuation is the other side of the equation, so if the valuation is,
Right, so for commercial properties, the valuation is based on the income
Right.
that is produced. I can have, the assessor is on vacation for a couple of weeks. I can ask him to put something in writing and/or come to a meeting to talk about that if you're interested. I mean, at this point, probably makes sense just to get some more clarification in writing, because that's an issue, a Board of Assessors issue, rather than
Right.
something for this board. So I will
Exactly.
ask him for some
Good.
additional information.
okay. Excellent.
Any further issues about this? Well, Mr. Holland is here.
No updates from EPG?
No, still waiting.
Okay.
I'm not sure progress on that. So
Okay.
Well, that means we'll see you back.
I'll be back.
Thank you for being here
Well,
again.
Good to see you all. Thank you
Right.
for having me.
Thank
And
you.
I'll work with Carrie to get the signature.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Here we go. You could pass these down, Paul. Okay. I would say 7:15 right on time, but that has been overused. We have the superintendent of schools, Loxley Combs, is going to go over an update on the school building project. I should preface this by saying that due to some scheduling snafu of last Wednesday, this was supposed to air during the school committee's town hall meeting.
It was actually a joint meeting of the school committee and the school building committee, and it was the regular meeting night for the school committee.
Right. And that was not, the PAC was not staffed that night. So the superintendent has asked us, because this is very important information, we are more than happy to oblige to, because we believe that is true, that this needs to be televised. So I appreciate you coming here today and giving us the update that people should have gotten then. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alonso. And we'll also now have a videotape that will be posted at YouTube once it gets fixed a little, I guess, and put up there. So that's the good news too, because we know a lot of people are accessing that information, and it's our priority to make sure that the citizens are getting the information they need around this project. And we have a very active website. We'll be posting up an FAQ, frequently asked questions, in the next couple days. That website will also have an opportunity for comments and questions that won't be public on the website, but they'll be filtered to someone at the end in terms of an email, and we'll make sure that the individual people get responded to, and with their permission, we're looking at incorporating those in our FAQs, as well as also posting comments. So, you know, democracy is changing, but it still requires our participation, and so we're looking at all the various forms. It's also in our intent we'll be having a lot of other public meetings and meetings with smaller groups as we go. So I would just encourage anybody that's listening tonight, if you have a club or organization or even just a neighborhood coffee group that you'd like for us to come and talk to, we're more than happy and willing to do that, to just give us a call at the superintendent's office here in the Lunenburg Public Schools, and we'll set that up for you. I do want to introduce, there's several of us that'll be bobbing up and down during the presentation, but we have with us from the school building committee, as well as a school committee member, Colleen Shapiro, is here this evening, and she's going to help with the presentation, as is Mr. John Londa, our director of facilities, is here. And we have Charlie Hay from Tape and Associates, our designer, that is here, and appreciate Charlie coming back. And Greg Holhen from our OPM, Owners Project Manager, Jocelyn and Lester and Associates. We are very, very fortunate to have the team that we do in Lunenburg, and we've extended that opportunity with having folks like Tape's group with Charlie, as well as Greg and Jocelyn and Lester. It's a real hard-working team that's getting things done and responding in a very timely manner. We were so fortunate and so happy to hear from from the MSBA that we were moved into schematic design on July 31st of 2013. That was a very significant step, and Greg's going to be talking a little bit more about that process and how it flows. But we'll jump right into the presentation.
And all I ask
And
is
I-
because, if I may
Okay.
interrupt here, if people are going to be changing and doing different parts of this, which I think is a great idea, just make sure everybody has a mic and talking into the mic so the people at home can hear what you're saying. So thanks.
And I'm assuming I'm close enough here, and I also want to ask if you guys can see this board. I'm not blocking it or anything, right?
I can
You can
see
see
it
beyond
fine.
me? Okay, because I do have the other mic if we need to move around and do other things. So we'll just go ahead and get started, and I think the most important thing about this project from day one is it has been focused upon what's in the best interests of our students. It's an educational program. It's a school facility to support the educational program of our students. And after many years of study, including 2 regionalizations, as well as a study around what it meant if we were to remain an independent district, you know that the recommendation from the school committee that after a public hearing and a special advisory it met, we had several public meetings about it, was a recommendation to move through to a 6 through 12 building. That recommendation was because of what we learned actually going through that regionalization process of what the costs of building facilities and core parts of facilities and how to extend the opportunities for students by making sure that you had the right population in those buildings and a sizable population in those buildings, so everyone was getting the efficiencies and the educational opportunities, as many of your students as possible. And from a building and just a financial perspective, I think the sweet spot that a lot of folks always spoke about in terms of regionalization was around 1,000 students. Now, Lunenburg, with a population, a high school population that's projected to be 450 students here in the next upcoming years, you can see why we began thinking about some of these other models and did that advisory around how do we sustain knowing that we're not going to be having additional students coming in from Shirley under a non-tuition agreement, and also thinking about the role of choice and where it falls in a community where you're starting to see some development. So we thought hard about those projections. There were multiple projections that were run in terms of what this was going to look like, but we kept the focus upon the educational opportunities for students. And I think that one of the things that we also started looking at other models out there, and if you looked around in building in under the MSBA and even before, the notion of co-located or even a combined 6 through 12 middle school, high school is one that we've seen in Massachusetts as well as across the country that has gained some favor. And it's gaining favor simply because everyone's wanting to make sure that they get the maximum dollar use out of these expensive school facilities that provide the kinds of educational opportunities that our students need for their 21st century and for post-graduation. So if you look around the Commonwealth, there are several of these schools not far from us. Berlin, Boylston, Tohoto just recently built a middle school, high school. They were 7 through 12 to begin with, but they included the 6th grade and decided that that was really beneficial for their program. They hadn't had a true middle school program before, and so that was of high value to them. And that's another reason that we talked about a co-located facility, but still very distinct educational programs for our students. And this facility is designed, and Charlie Hay, when he takes you through the design, will show you how we create a facility that really separates the students out and yet allows everyone to get the maximum benefits from those core facilities and those enhanced core facilities. And those core facilities were a really important a part of our instructional program that was falling behind for two reasons: the facility itself, but also the availability of staff, which was the other part of the scenario as we did the analysis of how do we maintain a strong, rigorous, diverse program for our students if we're in so many buildings that we have staff either on the road and traveling for half an hour a day, which causes just some downtime. I mean, teachers driving in a car are not teachers helping students and instructing students. We had times at the high school where we were looking at teachers with .8 teaching responsibilities, and their contracts were that. It's very difficult to hire top-notch teachers when you're only offering a .8 contract to someone. People are looking for full-time employment. And these were some of the factors that started to come into play when we started to talk about where do we find that sweet spot in terms of utilizing staff to offer a diverse curriculum in the arts, in the physical education arena, as well as a foreign language, and even to some extent with our science programs. Facility for our science programs was another big driver, as well as technology, because our current facilities at either the middle school or the high school are very inadequate in order to offer the kind of science program that is required for our students as they are in middle school as well as high school. The labs are just desperately outdated. Everyone keeps trying to do the best they can, but the fact is that our curriculum is significantly impacted by not having the facility to offer what students need. And I personally felt that is in good part what happens with some of our, I won't say our scores in science are poor, but our scores in science are not having the strength that our math and our ELA scores are. And our teachers are really strung by the facility. And this will give now our middle school and our high school science program an opportunity to be in a facility that meets those needs. So those were the kinds of things that we were focusing on. We had some help with our focus in our NEASC report, which basically put us in a warning status and said without some very significant and positive movement on a year-by-year basis, and we talked about this, I think, at several times and in several meetings, our accreditation is at risk. And that's not something that you want to have been with your high school. Lunenburg has a proud reputation around their educational system. We have really fantastic instructors and our teachers, as well as the students that are coming and working hard every day, and focusing not only on the academics but the community participation, which is the other piece that is a natural for us around this middle school, high school, because already our students from the high school and our students from the middle school have many opportunities to be interacting together. There's a lot of volunteering of high school students to help at the middle school level, as well as, you know, even before the 8th grade was located at the high school, we were including 8th graders on a lot of our athletic teams. We were getting waivers to do that. So there were all these indications in terms of just the overall strength of what a co-located 6 through 12 building could provide. And given our consolidation, we also know that that's a benefit for our students even below 6th grade. It will allow us at the primary school to go back to that school being a pre-K through 2 building, which will allow us to once again repurpose the technology room as well as the music room back to the original purpose of those rooms. Right now, we're using them as classrooms because we've put the third grade in there and did not want to move the preschool out. So right now, we have 2 rooms down there that are classrooms that were not designed for typical classroom use. And then once again, the faculty, the administration are making it work for students because that was so important for us to be able to keep the students and make sure that we maintain the programs that were necessary. It taught us that this three building configuration continues to be one that overall gives us the best opportunity in terms of the efficiencies gained from that. Efficiencies financially and deployment of staff, but also the efficiencies that come with having students make fewer transitions from building to building, and there's a big plus in that. The fewer building transitions that students go through, the better, because those kinds of transitions really do have some impact on the students. And those are the reasons, those educational reasons are the reasons that we got to where we were. Mr. Launder's going to talk in a little bit more about some of the building aspects of why we got to the new building piece. But the MSBA agreed that what our proposal around a 6 through 12 new building as the preferred option, that was the vote that was taken by the MSBA. That was the unanimous vote that was taken by the MSBA, and that was the vote that garnered remarks from members of that committee talking about the amount of in-depth study and analysis that had gone on around this particular project in Lunenburg, because there was at least one member of that committee that has been with us since the time that we started the regionalization discussions. And so Christine Lynch, who's the DESE representative on the MSBA board, was very knowledgeable about what our history was around that, and spoke very positively about the due diligence and the deep thinking that had gone into this particular building and our educational vision. And that's what this building's all about, is improving the instructional opportunities for our students, and doing that within the resources that are available to us. So. Oh, and next slide. All right. This slide, I think, speaks to some of the things. Last time when we came to you, there was some questions about the enrollment, and the design build for this 6 through 12 building is actually 820 students. And part of the concern that came up is a very, obvious and one that requires an answer, and we're here to provide it tonight as well, is that right now, if we open this 6 through 12 building, our enrollment, and you saw the enrollment even from last year, you really don't be able to read those numbers. So let me just pull them out. Currently, our primary school enrollment this includes preschool, 507 students in pre-K through grade 3. And we have 2 of those students that are placed out of district. So with those included, it would be 509. So the first number I give you is students that are actually in seats, and the other numbers that I then give you are students that, while they're enrolled with us, they're not attending the Lunenburg Public Schools. And yet there are certain responsibilities we have for those students. They aren't, for example, choice students, because with choice students, we don't have any direct interaction with choice students who choice out to another building. Out-of-district students who are placed there because of their individualized education plans, we have ongoing and direct contact with. At Turkey Hill Middle School, there will be 486 students in seats. This is based upon today's count, and the secretaries and administrators have been very diligently tracking in and out this year. We have 5 students who are attending out-of-district placements there, and so 491. And I gave you an extra packet there that really lines this out for you. I believe that might be the last page, actually. And then when we get to Lunenburg High School, you see that there are, with the 8th grade, and that very large 8th grade. The 8th grade is our last big class. It has 143, actually 146 students in it, 143 that are in attendance here. But that is somewhat of an anomaly anymore. That used to be our typical class enrollments. If we go back to about 2006, there were 634 students at Lunenburg High School in grades 9 through 12. That was at Lunenburg High School in grades 9 through 12. Currently, with the 8th grade there are 587 students at Lunenburg High School with the 8th grade there, and a very large 8th grade, 143 8th graders. There are 17 students that are placed out of district at the high school, and so the total at the high school is 604 students enrolled there, 587 attending. And those become very important numbers as you start to look at what happens in terms of enrollment and the design enrollment for these buildings. One of the critical things as people start to look at these numbers is to recognize the ratios, and that's the first page of the handout that I gave you. It's a graph that looks like this, or a chart. And you can see that over time we have a certain birth rate, and usually our birth rate in Lunenburg to enrolling students is a ratio of about 1.14. Then we go from kindergarten to first grade and first grade to second grade, and that stays pretty solid. It's about 1. So 1 to 1. We're not picking up a lot of students. 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. It's still pretty much a 1.2 ratio that we're talking about. In 5 and 6, ever since I've been in Lunenburg, that particular grade level, we always have a little bump up there. And you see the ratio moves up to that 1.05 at that point in time. Drops down 6th to 7th. The reason it drops down 6th to 7th, that's an entry year for a lot of kids to go into charter schools. And so we see that drop down to, it's not quite 0.95 at that point in time, but you see that we start to lose some population there. And it bumps up again between 7th and 8th, and then that 8th to 9th transition drops down to that 0.84 ratio. And that's where students are picking specialized schools such as Monty Tech, the vocational schools, to attend, as well as we see very consistently that number of students that are exiting to perhaps attend private academies as well, or religious schools. So that's why you see that notion there, and then it remains pretty stable as the students move on through graduation. So it's really important as we start to look at these numbers to do what the MSBA did, and that's make sure that we recognize what that looks like in terms of the number of students that are leaving, and currently we replace them with choice students. We open choice slots in order to replace those students. That is not anything that the MSBA is interested in supporting or encouraging us to do. So when they factor in these enrollments, they basically say, no, we're building this for the residents of your community. They do recognize that there might be some increased return from when you build new schools, or an enhanced retention rate, and they did build that in. But we started projecting out the numbers, and you have the MSBA projections as well there. And, based upon using those factors there, and we didn't factor in the decreases or increases for every single grade level. I focused on the 8th through 9th But when we hit the year that this building is to be opened, we're projecting an enrollment of 798 students. And that's assuming that students have exited and we have not replaced them. So students have exited because they're going to Monty Tech or they're going to a private school. So we just use those ratios just for our own edification of how does this work and does this make sense. We went through this exercise. When the MSBA first gave us numbers on May 22nd, 2012, they ran the projections. We gave them all sorts of data around developments, et cetera, and our attendance. They gave us basically some enrollment that said that our building enrollment was going to be probably around 780. That's the number that they projected initially to be the build number for 6 through 12. We were very uncomfortable with that number. We felt that they had not taken into account some of the factors that we thought were important for that. And so we went back and had another meeting with them on the 17th of July, and at that particular meeting is when we ended up with that 820 students as the design build for the building. And that becomes a driving force at this point in time in terms of working with the MSBA because that number gets set. In fact, just recently I received a letter from the MSBA that is asking us at this time to basically certify within 21 calendar days our agreement to that enrollment factor. So this discussion was very timely in terms of doing this. I've asked them about, how they go about making these projections and the tightness of them, I guess is what I would say. And they cite some concerns. They cite buildings across the Commonwealth that have been built and now are being closed because they don't have adequate enrollment or being repurposed for other things, and that's of concern for them. They stated they don't build for the peaks and nor the valleys. They look at averages. That's how they design enrollments, is looking at averages, and they look at those over 5 and 6 and 12 years. They don't really go out much past 12 years because projections beyond that are not very clear at all, and a lot of projections are not even clear when you first get them. But that's why we went back and really worked through the numbers, trying to build our confidence within these particular numbers, and why I wanted to share with you this information. I also wanted to let you know a little bit, Mrs. Bertram had asked at the last meeting, and I really appreciated her saying, will you go back and will you look at Emerald Place and will you look at Tri-Town, and what did they project to be the enrollment and what did the actual enrollment end up being? And when we look at Emerald Place, because of those were all two-bedroom units, the projection was for 30. And I don't know if there's a factor that, of sale rather than rent or lease that enters in here, but the projection was for 30. There are actually 36 students coming out of the Emerald Place. Now, 25 of them are attending Lunenburg. The other, that would be 11, the other 11 are either stayed in their home as communities. They moved here, but they stayed in their schools in their home communities, or they're in private schools, or they're in a charter school. So we know, and I think you all have seen that data from us in terms of exactly where those students are. So 30 were projected. There's actually 36. 25 are in seats in the Lunenburg Public Schools. Tri-Town, 37 was the projection. 37 is the number. And 29 are actually attending here in the Lunenburg Public Schools. And so those are the numbers that we're seeing there. So there's an update on those particular aspects.
So just to recap.
Yeah.
Just quickly, because these are the questions people ask. So what we're saying, or what you're saying is the projection enrollments, the enrollment projections includes bounce back, people coming back once we have a new school and it's a draw.
It does.
It includes the construction projects that we know today.
It does.
And it includes, we have indications that their projections in the past have been accurate for the constructions that has happened in town, the developments in town.
Yep.
Okay. And then going forward, when we're going through the project, there's built into the plans opportunities to expand should we need to, but we'll get into that in further detail.
Right, I was going to ask Mr.
Yeah,
Hay to talk about that. Anything else from the group here that you think I need to bring up around the enrollments? Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I thought I was going to hold my questions to the end, but as Superintendent Colmes know, I have significant concerns regarding enrollment. And given these projected numbers that you just cited for Emerald Place and Tri-Town, neither of those projects are completely built out yet. I did speak with the building inspector today, and Emerald Place is only about 2/3 built. So when we talk about a projected number of 30 students and we have 36 actual, 25 in seats, was that projected number for the units that are built to date or for the development as a whole?
The numbers that I received from the planning board, those numbers were for the development as a whole. Emerald Place, of the 238 units, 10% over 55, 30.
Well,
it said it may increase based upon the number of units.
I just want to note that, we're talking about, in my opinion, a very tight number if we're looking at when this building opens of an enrollment of 798, I think that's what you said, and a building capacity of 820. We've already exceeded the projection for the development as a whole, and as I said, Emerald Place is not completely yet built out, and actually the buildings that are projected to come are not the over 55 units, they're the single-family units. So we're not at full build-out. We've already exceeded the projection. Tri-Town, we've only built 3 of those buildings. Now, Emerald Place is expected to continue. That project is still moving ahead. The concern with Tri-Town is whether or not the additional buildings will be built, and that's still up in the air. I did speak with the planning director as well as the building official, and it's still unclear as to how that project's going to move forward, whether this developer is going to move forward, whether he's going to sell the options, or what exactly is going to happen with that development. But it's important to note that I don't believe all 99 of the units were completely occupied at the time that these projections were taken, because the 33 units have just started that completion process. So that's one of the questions I have. When we look at a 37 projection, again, that was for the entire development. That wasn't for just the 3 buildings that are built. So obviously, should those other buildings be built, it will be higher. As Emerald Place proceeds, it will obviously be higher. And the question that I have is what percentage of Tri-Town was actually built when that 37 students was calculated, because I'm not sure what the occupancy rate was.
2 were built and 3 were included in the, we knew the permits were issued for another 33. So 3 of the 6 were included in that. They knew that all 6 could eventually come online. That was in the data, but they asked about permitting. They want active projects and permitting. Those are the driving factors for them.
So the 37 projected were based on 90 whatever units, not the entire build-out?
According to what we received, the Tri-Town was based upon 204 units and 37 students.
I struggle with that. I don't know that that's correct, but okay. We need to verify that.
And I just want to point out, if it's based on 204 units and they projected 37, the question that I'm asking is, right now there have been 99 permits issued for Tri-Town. I checked this data with the building official today. There have been 99 permits issued. I'm not sure what percentage of those 99 were occupied when we take a look at that 37 student number that's current, that was projected, and we are there. And that number was projected for 204 units, not 99.
They're built now.
Oh, I know, but were all 33 occupied? Oh, the last building, because they just completed a building. And that's my question, is they just completed that last building. And I'm not sure where they were with the occupancy permits on that building at the time you determined that enrollment. And I'm not, frankly, I'm not sure what percentage are occupied.
I was giving you numbers from today in terms of numbers of students from Tri-Town and Emerald Place. And what we've seen is that that third building, there's been 5 more students that have come as a result of that third building opening
On
up.
top of the 37, or?
No, no.
Okay, so that 5 is included in the 37?
Yeah.
So-
That's what I was saying, is that we updated the numbers that you had in terms of actually here with us are based upon today's count and that building being opened up.
And I guess I'm not being clear with my question. My question is, the last building, I believe, was just completed. And my question is, what % of that building is occupied versus this 37 number? And you can't, that's not a question that you can
exactly.
answer.
I'm going to interrupt and say,
no,
I think you're asking the superintendent something, a question that she can't answer, since she doesn't follow building occupancy levels in town.
I understand that that's a question that the superintendent can't answer, but when we talk about, and I've raised this concern before, my concern remains that I believe, and I've had an opportunity to meet with the superintendent, I've met with the planning director, I've met with the building official. I truly believe that moving forward with the new school is the right thing for this community, and I want to be very clear that I appreciate all the work that's gone in. One of my biggest concerns is that this building is adequately sized to support the town moving forward. And I know none of us have a crystal ball, none of us can predict exactly what's going to happen, and I understand that a lot of these projections are based on guesses, based on averages taken from other communities, averages taken from other developments, and I appreciate that. But moving forward, when we go to the taxpayers, this is going to be a huge amount of money that we're asking the taxpayers to support. This building, we need to ensure that it's adequately sized for the projected growth of this community. And as we've discussed in the past, there are numerous developments on the books, and I understand that the MSBA can't necessarily consider them. But I think as a community, we do have to consider them. And given the fact that Emerald Place projected 30, we're at 36, we're not at full build-out yet. It is projected to be at full build-out. Tri-Town, we're not at full build-out. 37 was projected. We're already at 37. We're actually at half of build-out. So that's a very big concern for me. And today's population of between 6th grade and 12th grade is 846 students. Now, I understand that in that transition from middle school to high school, we lose a percentage of students to tech schools or to the other options, and I understand that. But even if you take out that number, we're still almost at occupancy, and that doesn't take into account the other developments that are on the books. And as I said, I did meet with the superintendent to share my concerns, and there was a bunch of information given to the MSBA and projected completion years, and I'm very concerned that those projected completion years are actually moving forward and moving faster than we had thought. Whalum Estates is a perfect example. It was projected to be 69 single-family homes. It's now before the ZBA to go up to 80 single-family homes, and these are 2- and 3-bedroom homes. So obviously, we can forecast that children are going to come with that development. The build-out was projected to be 2018. I think that's going to be escalated because he has indicated to the ZBA that he is ready to move forward. So that's obviously a concern. The Highfield Village, he was before the planning board last night for 66 single-family homes and is hoping to move forward with construction within the next couple of years. So a completion year 20 years out, I don't think is realistic. Hollis Hills is 136 single-family homes, which the town argued vehemently against. Unfortunately, we lost in court. And at some point that project, and this is a may move forward, but that's 136 single-family homes. So, when we look at these numbers, and granted, I understand that MSBA is concerned about build-out, and they are concerned about overbuilding schools, but my biggest concern is underbuilding this school. And I did, I have looked at the plans online, and I have met with the superintendent, and I understand that the capacity to increase the size of the school is incorporated. But I remain concerned that these numbers are not adequate, given the fact that even the 2 developments that were predicted and included in the projections are already over capacity without being at full build-out.
I personally kind of wonder about 37 students out of 240 units. I don't think that's correct. I think we need to verify that because I think that's a low number. So,
In terms of the projection?
yeah,
Okay.
I think what we would expect from 240 units would be significantly more than 37, but we need to verify because we do want to be accurate.
Yeah, I was just looking at the document that was provided that was consistent with some emails of some time ago, but we'll go back and verify it. I still need to go back, though. I think it's so important to remember, of that 841 starting the 26th, that if we had a 6 through 12, 22 of them would not be there because they're out in out-of-district placements. And we also are now at a point where we can start really attending to the number of choice students that we're entering into these numbers as we go. There are 38 choice students in those numbers as well, and 7 Shirley students. The Shirley students will be with us for the next couple of years because they were part of the agreement, and it's the last pieces that are coming out. In 3 years, they'll be gone completely, okay? And the choice, and it'll take some time to build this. The choice numbers, the grades with high choice, we have 10 in grade 12. Next year, 10 choice students are leaving the high school, not to return. And decisions and recommendations will be made around that. So I just would add that back is our daily, our annual deliberation about what we need to do, given the enrollments that we have, given the projections we have. Those new students coming in, if you look at the disbursement, we have those students coming into our community, only half of them, less than half of them, in Tri-Town where, it is Tri-Town, less than half were at the high school, 6 through 12 in this configuration. The rest of them were in the elementary grades and are counted in to these numbers that are numbers of enrollees where we have grade levels of 107 students. So I see as a superintendent and somebody who's watched these numbers over time, knowing that we have this coming in, will it all hit at once? Do we see something that's going to prompt a very significant impact on the town? I know we have these developments out there. When are they going to hit, and what will that build-out actually be? We shared the statistics, and the folks modeled it, and they're looking at the 10 to 12 year window. And as I rolled the numbers out, I understand the concern. I don't think the crystal ball is clear enough to say that that's not a good design build going forward, particularly knowing that we have Turkey Hill Middle School, that capacity is for a 4th grade level. If there were a huge amount of influx, there would be a way to adjust with regard to going through a 7 through 12. I don't like to be talking about us building for a 6 through 12 and then saying we could go there, but if we needed to, we do have that way to expand and contract to some degree.
Can I ask, potentially, I don't know if they're 3 separate questions or a 3-part question. So the first one is, having gone through this analysis with the MSBA and with the school building committee, how comfortable do you feel, and if you could speak, and we have members on the board and in the audience from the school building committee, how comfortable do you feel about those projection numbers, number one? Number two, at this point in the game, where we are and the MSBA has approved this concept and this particular building, how much leeway do we have to change that anyway? And also, of the projections you gave from those building developments, you gave total students in the whole district. Do you have a breakout of how many were at the high school? Because I'm assuming that not everybody who moves in goes to the high school right away. Like, they're probably, just statistically, they have to be fairly or somewhat spread out among all 12 or 13 grades if we include pre-K. So those 3 parts.
Right, and that's what I was saying. I can tell you exactly, Tri-Town, your last question. Tri-Town, of the 28 students from Tri-Town today, 8 are 6 through 12, okay? With regard to Emerald Place, 2, 4, 5 out of the 25 is how the disbursements play out, based upon
Okay, so then
today's
the
number.
other parts of my question.
Yes,
how
thank you.
comfortable do you feel with these projections, and how comfortable does the school building committee feel about these? And if we didn't feel comfortable as a community, what is our leeway to make changes now before we go further?
That's why we ran those numbers and looked at that. I feel comfortable in that we can discipline ourselves. I have no way of predicting these other, I know that they're out there sitting. How fast will they be developed? How fast will they be sold? I can't speak to that. I'm relying upon the Mass School Building Committee having those models and being able to say, this is a good number for you for the number of years that we build schools for. And if we need to come back and look at it, then they come back and look at it, but they don't touch a school for at least 10 years after they've been building it. And so for a 10-year period, these feel, to me, like they're doable numbers. And then we'll be in a position to talk about where we're at and what we need to do to respond to that, and that's why all the designers put some expansion room as part of their design as well to do that. The other option would be to include it, start designing for it, and just have it totally paid by the community. It wouldn't fall under their base reimbursement rate. How much do they want to go look back and look for it? They basically say, these are your numbers. If you want to start over, I guess we could go back and look at it, but it would be going back.
Thank you.
As a member of the school building committee, I share Paula's concerns that it feels like the number is tight, it feels low. However, as the superintendent indicated, I mean, this is a process the MSBA goes through town after town throughout the Commonwealth. I'm sure they're spot on in many. I'm sure they miss on some because, again, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, who's going to move into Highfield Village if it gets built? Who's going to build? Don't know. Will they have one kid? Will they have two? Will they have three? Will they have 10? I don't know. I think the number's tight. I think, again, they've got the science, the models. They do this every day. This is what they do. And I can, differ, but I can't prove it. And, again, as the superintendent pointed out, we can build bigger if we're not comfortable with those numbers, but it will be on the local dime. So it's a trade-off. Do you want to build bigger to be sure you got plenty of room, spend more local taxpayer dollars, or do you want to, work with the science at hand, and if there's down the road we need to adjust, we built in room, we built in expansion space, we deal with it then. But again, this is what they do every day. So,
Mr. Chairman, I understand that they do this every day and that they use models, but those models are only based on the data that's in them. And I again, I've met with the superintendent. We've looked at what information was provided to MSBA, and whether or not they went. My question and my concern is whether or not they went on building permits issued versus occupancy permits issued. And I keep going back to the fact that both Emerald Place and Tri-Town have not achieved full build out. Tri-Town's about halfway there. Emerald Place is only 2/3 built. They've already either met or exceeded the projection for the development as a whole.
And I don't think that's correct. And I think we need to verify that before we base all our discussion on that. Because I don't think that Tri-Town Village with 240 units, 37 students, that's one student for every 6 to 7 units. I don't think that's possible. That could be accurate, but we need to, may well be true, and we can talk that through, but we need to verify that before we base a decision on that.
And I agree with you, and I thought the purpose of tonight was to discussion, and what the superintendent said at the beginning is that the MSBA is looking for us to certify this enrollment projection within 21 days. And my concern is that we do go back and verify those numbers and look at those numbers before we verify that enrollment. Because I remain extremely concerned about both the timelines that were projected and the information that was given to the MSBA on on projected timelines, because some of these projects, after talking with the building official and with the planning board and attending the planning board meetings, some of these projects which were projected to begin in 2018, 2022, are expected to move much faster than that. So if the information that we gave showed that these projections were going to be 10, 20 years down the road, we need to revisit that if, in fact, these projects are moving forward. Additionally, I think it's critical that we go back and look at the projected enrollment for these developments, because although building permits were issued for Emerald Place, not all of those buildings have been built, nor are they occupied. And again, if 30 was projected and we're already at 36, that raises a red flag to me.
And I believe
And
from...
depending on what 30 was.
Exactly. And all I'm saying...
Built at the time.
All
I
I'm
don't think we have a clear answer on that.
And all I'm saying is that before we certify that, yes, we agree with these enrollments, we need to go back and look at what those projections were. Were they for the buildings that were built? Were they for the entire development?
Right.
And where are we realistically with the projected
I agree
timelines?
100%.
So...
I'm with you.
Okay, we will have that verified.
The other question that I have is, the chairman asked, do we feel comfortable as a community? And this is something I had intended to ask later on in the presentation. I know that there have been a number of workshops. I know there was a 3-day opportunity for individuals to come in. But my understanding of this process initially was that there would be a number of public forums, and I know that there's information up on the Facebook page, and I know that this presentation is actually online, so people can go and look at it and comment on. And you mentioned the opportunity for individuals to set up meetings, et cetera. But at some point, are we going to have a public forum, either at the high school or here, for the public to get the input from the public? And the reason that I'm asking this is because I have had a number of people express the same concern that I am about the sizing of the building. And since we're under the gun right now to certify within 21 days that we agree with this enrollment projection, the lack of a public input before we do that concerns me.
Okay, I'm going to hold off on that question because I'd like the superintendent and all the people here to, I think that's a sum-up question. Mm-hmm. When are we going to have a forum? If we're going to have a forum, I'd like the superintendent and the team that is here before us to finish the presentation and then we'll come back to your question.
Mr. Chair, just one clarification. Loxie, when you talked about what the state looks at for projections, the question is like Lunenburg Village, where they're talking about expanding the number of units there. Since that's a 40B permit that's been granted by the zoning board, is that considered permitted and in the projections as opposed to building permits in Tri-Town and Emerald Place? Because if it's a 40B development, they can start right away. They'll get their building permit once they meet their building permit conditions. So you don't need to answer the question. I just want to echo Paula's that the state will run a model, but we get to push back, and we should push back even though you've got 400 students projection for additions in the future. If it needs to be bigger now, it needs to be bigger now. But the state will respond to actual facts of things that have changed. And your comment earlier about Emerald Place being rental versus ownership, I believe that's a major driver of additional students. Yeah. So that original projection, I believe, is understated to begin with just because it was owner-occupied projected.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have our projections. The MSBA does their own around these permits and the types of dwellings that are there because they never have asked us what were your projections in terms of the number of students. That was a local thing that we discussed, but none of their data ever asks that. What were your projections? So they're running their own projections around those numbers as well and incorporating.
Okay, so let's just pin a red flag under enrollment and
we
let's go
got
forward.
it. Okay, thank you. I want to go back to the educational program and the facilities, though, and just once again highlight that the NEASC report of a couple years ago, where we ended up in that warning status, which we want to move out of, and we will as long as we continue to make progress towards a building project. It's always very good for us to be able to report we're in feasibility, we're moving into schematic design, because that's going to be critical for them. But they really hit the nail on the head in terms of just talking about the capacity of the building as it currently exists to provide for a 21st century educational program. And so we could put a new roof on, we could take care of some of those kinds of issues, put new windows in, we could address the envelope. But addressing the envelope does not address the infrastructure of that building, what it provides around science labs and technology and real educational space for students to work in, either expanded rooms, we have project rooms built into this, that's something that came out of visioning, as well as smaller workspaces, because we know that one size does not fit all, and one room size does not fit all. And one of the most exciting things about this building is its capacity to provide those different size spaces for the way that we do education today in terms of large, even larger groups, small, even one-on-one groups. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Londa to talk about the existing building conditions.
Good evening. Lunenburg High School, of course, was built in 1957. It's in its 55th year of operation. It does need major repairs on many systems, particularly the roof system, which is pushing 28 years old. The window systems, which are all original, has significant issues with access for people that are disabled, with ramps that are steep throughout the school, doorways that are very narrow for access to restrooms. It has issues with asbestos. Asbestos was substantially used in 1957 when the school opened, and so it is in multiple building materials, floor tiles, ceilings, glues. It's just about a large variety of things that we see, and does limit work that can be done in the school. Costs for some of these items were all very substantial. Roof replacement cost, which didn't include the pitched roofs, was over $770,000 just to replace that. The window systems, $1,044,000 just to replace windows. $262,000 just for updating ADA compliance issues. It goes on and on. There was essentially somewhere in the order of about $11.5 million in just repairs alone, which, as we said, really does not address any of the educational issues with the building. It just really keeps the envelope tight and keeps the rain out and the heat in. In the feasibility study, we looked at the full range of everything from renovations to the high school, new construction for a high school, through a renovation in addition to the high school, and to finally also a new middle school, high school, and looked at all of those issues. The school building committee, after looking at all those costs for those options, concluded that the middle school, high school new construction was the economically sound and educationally sound solution. And coming to that conclusion, we tried to put the overall long-range view of the school facilities into some perspective. From 2005, when we completed construction of Lunenburg Primary School, we knew we weren't done. The 1999 master plan indicated that we had major work required for 3 of our older buildings, the Pasios, the high school, and the middle school. So we looked at all those costs as we went through. Just the repairs alone were going to be somewhere on the order around $28 million, and once again, that really doesn't address anything substantial with the educational program, just once again keeping systems operational. As you saw in this last year, from June 2012, when the Pasios was closed to get us back to a 3-school district, we have looked at that issue of, well, what schools should have been closed, which one made more sense to keep operational. The middle school was that school, was the one that we should keep operational. It's a bigger building, it has more capabilities, it has larger core facilities, a larger gym with a mini gym, bleachers, it has a larger cafeteria with a working stage, it has a larger library, it had better site lighting throughout, it had less asbestos in it than the Pasios did. It had a 106 kilowatt solar array on it that was providing power to the school, saving about $10,000 in costs for operation of that school every year. It had better roof insulation. All in all, the middle school provided us more possibilities for the future and a better facility for the future. That being said, it was one of the schools that was identified as needing repairs. It's in its 44th year of operation. 10 years from now, when it's in its 54th year of operation, it's going to need some work. And that's just what happens with buildings as they get older, systems wear out. At some point, you have to make a strategic decision of what are you doing with the building, renovating it, replacing it. The major issues that we will see in looking out into the future for the middle school will be replacement windows. It does have single pane windows, does not have as much window space as the Pasios of the high school did, but they are single pane windows, and it's something that, in a renovation we probably would look to have replaced. The HVAC system is operational, will probably continue to be in operation for the next 10 years without any problems. It runs a pneumatic control system, which is an old style system. We are able to get parts for it and is fully functional at the present time. But that is something that at the 50-year point, we were looking at replacing those very same items at Lunenburg High School. And then finally, the roof. The roof was installed in 95 through 98. We have time on the roof. I would not anticipate we would do anything to that roof other than ensure it was well maintained between now and the next 10 to 12 years. However, that would be the next item that would need to be addressed along with a renovation. And that's one of those things where you look at it and we have to be strategic about that as well. We have this power purchase agreement for the solar array. And once again, it's generating $10,000 in savings every year. In 2026, we will own that solar array, and at that point, it will be generating about $20,000 of savings for the school department by producing electricity. However, prior to 2026, we should be looking at doing whatever we wind up doing with the roof, whether it be a full replacement or some kind of renovation to the roof. So, because that cost to take all of those solar panels off are currently carried in the power purchasing agreement with the provider. So that's a little bit about how this project fits into the big picture. With infrastructure, you're never really done. But this middle school, high school would provide us a substantial boost in our condition of our current facilities.
Quick question.
Yes, Mr.
Actually,
Matthews.
it might be for the superintendent. So if we did the $11.5 million in base repairs, would that make NEASC happy for our accreditation, or are we still at risk?
We're still at risk.
Okay, so we could spend, because I'm already starting, some people will say, why do we can't afford this, we can't do this, we shouldn't do this. It's like, okay, so what's the alternative? We can fix up the old building, keep the weather out, et cetera, spend $11.5 million of local money, because the MSBA won't participate in that. Other option, of course, is one of the things we had discounted was to just renovate the high school, get it back so it's much better shape. That was going to cost somewhere around $28 million. Again, that wouldn't satisfy the MSBA requirements or what they're looking for a educational investment they would want to make. So chances are we'd be running solo on that as well. So that'd be local dollars. So when we say, addressing our building needs now, we can't afford it, we can't do it. Well, we don't have a choice. We have to do it. We have to do something. So it comes down to how do we spend our money as taxpayers? What's the best return we get for the investment? Do we patch it together, solve nothing, spend $11 million plus or minus? I don't think so. Do we spend $28, $30 million local dollars, still have a substandard building? I don't think so. So, again, just want people thinking long-term and the realities. We can't just say, no, we can't afford it. We got to do something. That's my only point. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Virtual.
I want to understand the timeline for the middle school, and I have a question specific to asbestos abatement. Are there any asbestos abatement issues at the middle school, or have those all been addressed and there isn't anything in the horizon?
All three of the older schools have asbestos issues. At the middle school, we have some significant issues, ones that will probably have to be addressed in the short term, and for the long term, almost all of the flooring material in the middle school is asbestos floor tile. Currently, other than a few tiles that have been damaged that are, not in the prime classrooms, most of it's adhered, fully adhered, and it gets coated with finishes. So it's really not a health concern for students, staff. As long as we maintain it, we're allowed to keep it in place. So we do have asbestos there. The other area where we have concerns on asbestos is we have some areas above the ceiling in the classroom wings where we have a recommendation from a asbestos management planner that should be removed. And we are currently working on cost data on that. I think that's going to be an expensive project in the terms of probably a couple $100,000, which would entail removing of ceilings, removing of sprayed on fire retardant material, and then replacement of ceilings. So we are working on trying to come to grips with cost data. That's something that would come in through capital planning. It's potentially something that the MSB could assist with.
And I guess that's where I'm going with this. As we do this school reconfiguration, and I would agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Matthews that trying to put a Band-Aid on the high school just doesn't make sense. And I want to say again that I agree with this model of a 6 to 12 school. But I want to understand what costs are likely moving forward with the middle school and what that projected timeline is, and whether or not we can incorporate any of these into this building envelope as part of this new reconfiguration process, or whether or not we're going to have to go back to the MSBA, and what timeline you expect to go back. You highlighted some issues, the windows, the HVAC system, and the roof. And if I heard you correctly, and I guess I want to check this, is that you don't anticipate doing those in the short term. You're looking 10 years out for those repairs? Or do you have a projected timeline for that?
We think those are going to be in the out years.
Okay.
Like I said, the only project that I see that has a sense of urgency on it is dealing with this spray-on fire retardant that's above the ceilings.
Okay.
And that is being driven by information we're getting through the Department of Labor, who has the asbestos inspection program, and our management planner who's surveyed it and it's recommending that it come out. And that's the one, like I said, where we really need to resolve total costs involved to be able to decide whether or not this is something we have to bring the MSBA in or not. $250,000 is the trigger that would potentially bring them into the project.
And you mentioned the repairs on the roof, and again, you're thinking long-term, more than 10 years, or you mentioned a number before the solar array of the 2026.
Yeah,
and
I think you want to be addressing this while it is still under the power purchasing agreement, so that would be before 2026.
Okay.
And like I said, there's a couple of possibilities, and it could be either a complete replacement, which I kind of tend to think that maybe not what we wind up doing, but more along the lines of some kind of either a coating or reseaming of the roof. It may not buy as much time. It may buy 10 years, which actually might be very cost effective for the town. But want to do that, I think, while Broadway Electric, who is the vendor, why they still have the power purchasing agreement in place, and they would take the panels off and put them back.
Okay, thank you.
So hopefully we can time this as a community looking ahead. I mean, we got to deal with the high school, middle school now. If we're looking at the middle school building, Turkey Hill, at some point 10 years out, that starts coming in about the time that all of our other buildings that we deferred until, about 10 years ago, those are starting to come off the books. So hopefully the timing works out we get some relief, and then we take care of the next problem, and then we kind of balance it. That's how I look at it.
Evening.
Good evening.
Wanted to touch briefly on the MSBA project initiation process at the moment. And as you know, you've been at this since '07. And then I will come back to some of the project milestones as we get into some more of this presentation. But at the moment, the project, again, it was a statement of interest in '07 to participate in this. The town of Lunenburg submitted something in '09 for the statement of interest. Currently, July of 12, MSBA issued to the town of Lunenburg to conduct the feasibility study that we're currently in right now in the preferred schematic. The first of the year, one of the requirements to deal with the MSBA, you hire an OPM. Jocelyn Lesser, who I work for, was hired in the beginning part of 2013. Tapé Associates was selected by the MSBA as the architect of record for this project. Shortly afterwards, I believe in March, we just wrapped up the interviews and the award of the CM at risk, or the construction manager for risk, in July. And we have a base, so you know, we have a base reimbursement rate of 53.53 at the moment. And again, that'll proceed on as we determine into the next steps and how that base rate will be determined. So once we get through the preferred schematic, that's when the total project budget will be developed by the MSBA.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Hi. I just briefly want to talk about the collaborative process that has brought us to this point, and what we will be presenting this evening. There have been over 25 meetings and workshops to date, including the 3-day visioning workshop that was already mentioned, which sort of kicked off this visioning process, where we had administrators and teachers from all 3 of our buildings present. We had art and music teachers, the technology director, special ed teachers, members of the guidance department, the athletic director, school committee, school building committee. Several fabulous high school students participated in that. And we had parents with children ranging from pre-K up through the high school who participated in that initial visioning. Since there have been meetings amongst the school district with teachers, staff, and administrators, several meetings, I don't even know how many, that the superintendent and the chair of the building committee, Mike Mackin, have gone to with the MSBA. I believe the town manager has been at some of those as well. Numerous meetings with the Lunenburg School Building Committee, which is a collaborative group in itself, with members of the Board of Selectmen, the representatives from the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, the Planning Board, the School Committee. We have advisors that are the town manager, the high school principal, and the facilities director, and we have some community members. So that committee right there is very collaborative to begin with. There are also groups of staff and administrators from both the high school and the middle school who have been meeting to discuss what the plans and the vision should be as we go along. Along with the school committee, and meetings with the town regulatory officials, which included public safety, the DPW director, building inspector, planning board director. There were meetings with the technology director, the athletic officials. I think there's been several meetings with the athletic director to discuss the fields. And so among the topics at all of these collaborative meetings and workshops to date, some of them have been educational vision and goals, building options analysis, building systems, including mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection, educational technology, and the MSBA submission and report requirements. And some other topics that I know have come up have also, there's been several discussions around the site plan and the driveways, the entrances and exits, and relative to Oak Ave and Mass Ave and all of that. Many discussions surrounding parking and the number of parking spaces and where the parking will be, and again, the athletic fields, and community use, and also how the parking and the building configuration relates to use by the community, which there will be more discussion of that as we look at the building plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Bertram.
Mr. Chairman, and I know you said to save this for the end, but I want to talk about, because this directly affects the collaborative process, and I just want to understand moving forward what you anticipate as far as, do you see any public meetings moving forward, or are you just looking for?
We see many public meetings, both large forums at the high school auditorium or wherever, and forums up here, and as the superintendent mentioned earlier, meeting with the town committees, meeting with town groups, whether it's at the senior center or, yes, a neighborhood coffee, or anybody who's interested. But we will also certainly be having larger forums, either most likely at the high school, where anyone and everyone in the community is welcome to come and engage.
Okay, and do you have any idea of a projected timeline for when those are going to happen, or
That I will have
you
to
haven't
defer
worked that
to the
out yet?
superintendent at this time. I don't know what.
Thank you.
Yeah,
The committee meetings are in the next couple.
Thank you.
The committee meetings are in the next couple weeks. I know everyone's very interested in numbers, and Greg's going to talk a little bit about the milestones going forward and when we get some estimated numbers, et cetera, because we've heard from the community that that's information they're very interested in as well.
And again, briefly, this is the milestone schedule. I think as Loxie had said, we're starting to get into some public meetings and stuff that I'll start to get back into this schedule. But, in a brief overview, on the 31st of July, we received permission to move into the preferred schematic. With that case, again, the timing, as I had said before, we had hired a CM at risk. The advantage of that is we're bringing them aboard to help us do some of the estimation to determine what this project would cost. So the next real key milestone for us right now is the 14th of August. The drawings will be completed for schematic design, and they'll be sent out to the estimators. One is Peter Bradley and Company. They're a firm that's hired by Tappe, the architects, to determine the cost, and as well as Shawmut Design. They'll determine that and start to put numbers together. We've given them to the 5th of September to come back with their review and start to look at it. Typically in this process, what you do is you sit both estimators down, and they call that a reconciliation process. We'll sit and look at both numbers, make sure scope is there, and start to determine that. And we have determined we're shooting for the 10th of September to wrap up that process. It could overlap a couple days, but we have to supply the MSBA the estimate. They want it 2 weeks before their formal board meeting, which is the 10th of the 3rd of October. So we have to give it to them on the 19th. They get the estimate, they look at it for 2 weeks. The rest of the whole package for the preferred schematic will go in on the 3rd of October. The next key milestone would be the 20th of November. That's when the board from the MSBA would approve this, and they would come back with what portions they would fund as well as their reimbursement rate. We can continue to look at the schedule, but I think for the moment, that's probably key what you should know. Then I'd like to turn it over to Charlie so he can kind of walk you through the building.
Good evening. Yeah, you can go right to that. We'll talk very quickly about the proposal. This is the proposed site plan, and at schematic design
I'm going to ask that you grab the microphone or use the, just so people at home can hear. Thank you.
This is the proposed, is that working? We assume it is. This is the proposed site plan, which is at the schematic level, and there's the Turkey Hill Middle School we've been talking about. Here's your turf field, here's Mass Ave, here's Oak Ave, and here's the Paseos. And this, the concept here, which is a pretty typical concept for a school project, is to build a new building on your fields, while your existing school remains fully operational. Once the new building is complete, move the students and the staff to the new building and take down your old building and replace the fields that you built on top of. And this is it's a very effective strategy in that it really should avoid, and is particularly effective on this site, it should avoid any significant disruption to the ongoing operations of the school, either the new school once it's complete or the existing school during the construction period, with the one exception that we're going to lose a couple of grass fields for a couple of years. So there are going to be issues around both recreational sports in town and also obviously high school athletics. However, you're very lucky because you still have a turf field that can stay fully operational during the entire construction period. A lot of schools don't even have that. A lot of districts don't even have that opportunity. So that's a positive. But the intention here is to have parking in front of this new school, to have a new entrance off of Oak Ave, to have the existing curb cut essentially near the library off of Mass Ave. And so we have a through road that allows for cars to stack, and with a separate designated auto pickup and drop off, a pickup and drop off for 10 buses, faculty and visitor parking in front of the school. And then there is, right where it is now actually, although somewhat reconfigured, there's another parking area that would be designated student parking as well as game day parking probably. We then have two full-size fields, which can be, we presume one will be a football field, the other could be a soccer field or a football practice field, bleachers, sports lighting, resurfacing tennis courts, which are there and would be resurfaced. And then the intention in the front is to actually try to sneak in another grass field here, which now is a lawn which you do have set up for recreational soccer, but it's pretty tilted. So one of the goals is to make it more of a flat field so that it could be used for practice during the construction period. So that's effectively the site, the way it's been organized. The Turkey Hill Middle School is connected to the new middle high school. The new middle high school is connected to the Paseos and to the library. These are accessible walkways. There is emergency vehicle access around the building in this site. There are real topographical issues, as you know, from walking around out there where the building drops off. So we have some elevational issues to work with, but it will work in the end, and we should have full access for the students, using fields and using the grounds. And it has been, in a preliminary manner at least, vetted, as mentioned earlier, with police, with fire, with Department of Public Works, with engineering. So we've gone through some of those issues with them. Our engineers have been in touch with the water department, et cetera, et cetera. So let's... The building diagram right now, and I think it's important to mention that this is a conceptual diagram still, that the final design may change. The final design may change in the next month. This is an iterative process. This has been going on for a while now, and we're slowly layering information into the concept, and the information is programmatic, coming from faculty and staff and administration. It is coming from regulatory agencies. It's also coming from technical constraints and technical issues, and ultimately it's going to very much be informed by cost. And obviously at the end we want a building that's reasonably affordable, that fits within the town's sort of idea of what this should cost, and also very importantly within the MSBA's guidelines for costs. So we will see if it's the exact configuration in the end, but the intention here is to have a designated high school wing, a designated middle school wing, and then of course shared core facilities. And the shared core facilities include the library. We have a technology lab associated with the library. We have a graphics lab. We have two high school art classrooms. We have a middle school art classroom, which also can be a project lab. We have a full theater, performance theater with 600 seats. We have a gymnasium with 500 bleachers. We have separate middle and high school locker rooms for obvious reasons. We have a cafeteria that will be shared by the students and obviously the library. And we have a greenhouse. So we're taking the not taking it, but we are replicating the greenhouse that you have now on the south side of the building to be shared again by the middle high school students. So effectively, you have 2 classroom wings and you have these shared spaces that all the students come to use. And the middle school and Brian and Tim, the middle and high school principals, have been very good about trying to vet this relative to their schedules. They know they need to merge their schedules so that there aren't any issues around conflicts. We've had quite a bit of intensive work on that already. And they believe this will work very effectively. But the 2 academic wings are fairly separate, although there's the possibility of students doing a little bit of cross circulation at kind of the 8th grade, 9th grade level. Administration is the front, and there's a designated public entrance that will be controlled from administration. It will be very much like the entrance you have at the high school now, where if you go into the vestibule, you are greeted. You can't enter the school until you've been greeted. And that will be the way any visitor will enter. There is also the intent to have the middle school students enter through one door and the high school students enter through another door. So they'll arrive on the same bus, or they'll be dropped off by their parent, or in the case of high school students, they may drive. But high school students will enter into one entrance and go to the high school wing. Middle school students will enter into another entrance, and they will probably be in the CAF and then ultimately go into their classroom wing. The high school is organized around science labs on both floors and classrooms on both floors, special education spaces on both floors. The middle school, which is really grade and team focused, so different organization, has the 6th grade on the lower floor in its own little academy, with the idea that it's really a transition year, both socially and emotionally and educationally, between elementary school and middle school, and then 7 and 8 are on the upper floor together, which makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. And they're set up into teams, 2 and 3 classroom teams. So that gives you a sense of the floor plan, the way it's proposed to date. The other issue that is going to, obviously, I already mentioned, but is going to be on people's minds, I'm sure, is the whole idea of how the project is constructed and phased. The blue box there, which is the existing high school, is going to remain fully operational. We're not impacting on roadways. We're not impacting on parking areas during the construction phase. The new construction will be on top of the 2 fields, the 2 grass fields. But we can have a construction entrance off of Oak Ave, which means that the high school can operate just like it operates now in terms of pickup and drop off and parking. Not that necessarily it operates ideally, but it will be very familiar to everybody. It's not going to change particularly, with parking on both sides of the building, et cetera, while construction goes on. Furthermore, the existing turf field will be fully accessible for games and practices and community use, and the Turkey Hill Middle School will remain much as it is today. We are not removing the Memorial Gate. We're not removing the pre-existing concession stand or the ticket booth or the storage building associated with the turf field. So really, life will go on somewhat as usual, with the exception that we're losing these fields. Once this new building is built, students and staff will move over, as I've already talked about, and the final portion of construction will be to take this part of the site, abate and tear down the old building, build these 2 new fields, complete the site work. But during that time, which would be during a summer and into the fall, there will still be a designated entrance on Oak Ave, and we should be able to complete the through road that allows parents and buses to move all the way through the site while construction is being completed. So it's a pretty effective phasing plan and approach, which should lead, hopefully, to limiting costs around phasing. I mean, some of these projects get very expensive just accommodating phasing issues, and we hope that this one will not be one of those. So that gives you a sense of overview of what we're talking about. And again, we're at a very preliminary stage of thinking about how the building might appear and its exact shape. But right now we have this high school wing that I showed you, a middle school wing with a track in the back. This building is really a community building, and I don't think I did that justice in my presentation, but we have the opportunity here to really have this building, this wing, be for community use, for evening use. The rest of the building could be closed off. Community could come there to use the gym, to use the theater, to use the cafeteria, to use all of the above, without having to go into the rest of the school. So there's a nice kind of feature to this building, which is the ability to zone that portion of the building for weekends and for evenings. This is sort of a view of the entrance with the classroom wing and the cafeteria and the entrance there. That gives you a close-up of one of the entrances, cafeteria. Again, early days in terms of concept design. These are large, complicated, these are large and complex buildings. They take a long time to design. We really build them like buildings in terms of in terms of computer modeling and building in all this information. So we have a ways to go. This is sort of standing at the Memorial Gate, looking up at the library and the greenhouse, which is up the hill. So as I said, we're really talking about a fairly significant topographical change there. This is the back side of the middle school as it's conceived, with these two sort of gable ends that are simple, sort of barn-like structures with a stairway, glass stairway in the middle. There's a nice courtyard in this concept. We're assuming this is all masonry. So that's the end of the images. And do you want to talk about contact information? Okay. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Charlie maybe before?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ebersol.
Two questions. Are you looking for LEED certified for energy, and is there a possibility of solar on the roof?
We are going to be submitting to, this is a CHIP school, which is the, this is the high performance, collaborative high performance program that the MSBA runs, which is the equivalent of LEED effectively. And the nice thing about it is not only does it create a energy efficient building, not only does it improve the environment for the students, but you get 2 reimbursement points from the MSBA, which is terrific. So when Greg talked about the base reimbursement points, the project will be layering some additional reimbursement points onto that, which point the MSBA, the state's total will go up and your total will go down a little bit. So typically a CHIP school will have a high performing envelope, it will have high efficiency boilers, it will have sophisticated lighting controls, it will have use of recycled materials. It will probably not have PV, photovoltaic panels on the roof to start. And the reason for that is capital cost. And typically the budgets that the MSBA establishes don't support the PVs. What CHIPS will insist on, and what we always do, is make the infrastructure prepared for PVs. And what most communities who are interested in doing that usually find a way to do it either through grants or through a design, build, lease kind of program, and that there's a lot of that out there now. So there's usually the opportunity to get photovoltaics if you want them later. However, it probably wouldn't happen as part of the project just because we can't afford it, to be honest, unless it gets sort of added on. But the MSBA probably wouldn't participate. But we will have a CHIPS certified project, which means we will have a green school. It will be sustainable.
Thank you.
Ms. Bertram.
I just have a question. I have 2 questions, and I believe one of them is for you, and that's specific to the Oak Ave cut-through, the road from Oak Ave to Massachusetts Avenue. And while I understand the reasoning to allow for busing and for parent pickup, I have some concern about safety concerns relative to people starting to utilize that roadway as a cut-through to get from one part of town to another. And do you have any idea of any controls that are going to be put into place, or whether or not that's been considered from a safety perspective of having that roadway now go from Mass Ave to Oak Ave?
Well, you can have you certainly can put in speed slowing devices like tables, et cetera, which are kind of better than speed bumps, but will slow down traffic. I think that we have done this on other projects and it has not been a problem. Usually the benefit of allowing traffic to queue on site trumps concerns about through traffic, because the issue is how do you get traffic off of adjacent roadways and onto the site from a traffic planning point of view. I mean, you have significant problems at Turkey Hill right now with people stacking, certainly in the afternoon. I haven't seen it in the morning, but and that's what we're trying to avoid. So by doing this, it gives us enough length to get all the cars stacked on site. I guess it's possible that somebody who really wanted to cut through during off hours could rush through there. I think the way to do it would be do traffic slowing tables that will not allow them to get up to a really high rate of speed. We have to check with the DPW on what they're comfortable with relative to plowing, but that would be the strategy. It's not dead straight. It does have a curvature, which usually helps a little bit with traffic slowing as well.
Okay, thank you.
I do think that you want and need two means of access. I think most safety, most sort of police and fire departments insist on it, because what they want to be able to do is make sure there's always an open way in for ambulances, for fire trucks, et cetera, if a tree falls over or whatever. So I think we have to have two ways on and off. Furthermore, it really expedites the whole construction method. It means your construction traffic is not associated with your day-to-day traffic during construction, which is an enormous benefit to the school. I mean, it's a great setup. You're lucky you have this site, because a lot of sites are much more difficult to organize in terms of the construction piece of it. So,
thank you. The other question that I have relative to the schematic design is specific to the fields, and it's, as you mentioned, it is going to impact the athletic programs, and you're still working through that process, and I understand that. But I think that for people at home and for myself, how do you anticipate coordinating the football program, the other athletic programs that have the potential to be affected with the loss of these fields? Do you anticipate them playing on the turf field? What repairs need to be done to the turf field? Is that going to be part of this project? So if you could just highlight the potential impacts to the athletic program and what right now conceptually you're looking at.
Under this project, the turf field will become very heavily used because all of the games, the official games, will end up playing there, along with all the youth games that are being played there. So it's going to be an uptick in scheduling. One of the things that Mr. McAuliffe and I have talked about is it does mean that we probably won't have the number of home games that we currently have for the construction years. Typically, there are about 5 league games, and then there are some additional non-league games. In order to make sure that the full community is able to do that, we are considering the possibility of the need to cut back on the number of home games. But there will still be home games, at least 5 home games per season for the sports will be continued, and more if we can fit them into the schedule. We're identifying fields either in the community or in close by. There's soccer fields, there on Route 70, as well as in Devon's, and Mr. McAuliffe have already talked to them, particularly around the soccer programs, the male and female soccer programs, and that becoming practice areas for them. So we're putting our heads in motion in terms of how do we get people and get the field scheduled for the fall sports in particular. I think that will probably be the most heavily impacted based upon our setup and where the other fields are, and make sure that that those programs continue, there will be an impact. But it certainly doesn't mean that it's going to be, like we're cutting sports because we're not going to be offering because they can't play there. There's a lot of schools that have dealt with building projects, and Mr. McAuliffe has already talked to them and getting all sorts of ideas. We're just now reaching out. We have a meeting scheduled with DPW and Parks and Rec. We've finally been able to get through everybody's vacation so we can have those and really start articulating more of those precise details. It is a process. I know it feels like these are all questions people want answers to, and we work through them together. It's very important. These sessions that we're having, this particular session as well as any of the other public sessions, we need to hear what's on your mind. We look for that, and then we can get the responses back to everybody. But those responses are developed through a lot of study and further interaction with other parts of our community. I know the OPM was just talking about the abutters and getting letters out to the abutters and starting some meetings that are particular for abutters around this project. So those are all queued up, and we'll keep moving down this process. So lots of opportunities. And we encourage everyone to get involved sooner as opposed to later. So that's why we're setting up these multiple opportunities. Finance Committee is, I believe, the end of September. We're meeting with them. We'll post all the dates. We'll communicate them out. But over the course of the next 2 months, there's additional opportunities for televised meetings. And with every time, we'll have even more information because more of this will be vetted, more will be known. We'll get the enrollment situations, those questions discussed, and the answers back to you, which brings me to a question of you don't have committee meetings coming up for the next couple of weeks, is that correct? Do you have a Board of Selectmen meeting next week?
We were scheduled for one, but I don't know.
You
the
are,
agenda.
okay, okay.
Just work session.
Okay. And the following week?
No, I think you agreed last week that next week you were going to do a work session on policies and procedures, and we're not meeting on the 27th.
Okay,
The 27th was the policies and
well,
procedures.
that's what we talked about at the meeting, but then the town manager did poll everybody if they can do that workshop next week and then have the 27th off. Because the town manager is not here next week, so that would be a good week to do the procedures, policies and procedures.
And it was a light agenda week.
Right.
No, nothing on the
Right.
agenda.
So then your next meeting after that would be September 3rd, which is the day after the holiday. I thought you might want to have some discussion about that meeting. And then September 10th. So.
Is there action you need from us?
Well, the 28th, the MSBA is looking for certification back to them. So that's why I was trying to follow up on the questions and the meeting dates. So.
Can you do it by next week? Because we
I
could
will
post our
work hard.
meeting with a session with the school
Yep.
first.
I will work very diligently to do that. Yep. Okay.
Ms. Bertram, I sense you have another question.
I do.
I can see you fidgeting with your papers even out of my peripheral vision.
Carmack says.
And it's relative to the schedule. You've mentioned the need for public involvement, and you're going to be scheduling those public hearings. And I guess I want to understand, because this is a pretty aggressive timeline, and I understand that you want to move forward, and I understand that it's important that we move forward. But at the same time, given the fact that, we're in August, and we're looking right now at a schematic estimate to MSBA on September 19th. The concern that I have is, at what point does the public comment on the schematic design, and how, if what the timeline is. It's a very short window for public involvement.
Talk about that. I'm going to hand that over to our OPM to talk about.
Well, I think the first thing up is certainly the cost, so that's why we're pushing hard on the schematic design to get some costs and to get the feedback from the MSBA. But again, I would think that full package goes in around the 3rd of October. I would think that would be the time too. We should have the community involved to start looking at some of these designs. We would have a an idea of where we are with costs. What we wouldn't have back from the MSBA is certainly their buy-in for the reimbursements or any ineligible stuff.
I guess I'm trying to understand the process, because once you submit that schematic design to MSBA, if we don't have that public involvement prior to that, are we really kind of stuck if we get the buy-in from the MSBA on the schematic that we submit, and then we hear from the community that there's concerns, and then the decision is made to change? Aren't we a little bit late in that process? Shouldn't that happen before you submit to MSBA?
Well, problem is costs. I think we all want to know we can build something we can afford. So that's why you go through this timeline with them. Initially, this was moved back sometime, but then they moved this ahead on the schedule. So, I mean, at this point, yeah, I tend to agree with what you're saying, but I think you have to follow the modules for the MSBA to get this stuff in, to vet out the cost and understand what their concerns as well. Sure.
From the microphone, please.
Just to say very quickly, if the project passes, there's going to be more design upcoming. In other words, there are a series of phases. There's feasibility study, which we've done. There's schematic design, which we are engaged in. If the project passes, the community supports the project and funds the project, which is sort of conceptually scheduled for December, we'd proceed into the next phase, which is called design development, which is also a design phase, but it's a more developed design phase. Following that, there would be what is called construction documents, which is really the full development of a bid package, and then it would be bid. The MSBA is not going to object if there are changes to the design between schematic design and design development, as long as the size of the building doesn't change and the costs don't change particularly. If the shape of it changed, if where a room was changed, if the roadway moved, they would not have a strong objection. If you moved sites, they would have a strong objection. So there are certain things they wouldn't go for, but generally speaking, they're gonna, we still have latitude to make design changes. But it is important, at this point, having done this a lot of times, it really is important to get enough information to make the public hearings productive, to be able to answer the questions that people have. Because if we can't do that, it appears that the project is not well thought through. It appears that we don't have the answers we need to have. So that's why there has to be enough legwork done that we can go before the public and really answer all their questions reasonably and fairly. And that does include having costs. It does include having a fully developed design, and it does involve having the reassurance that we have submitted it to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. So I think that's why, but this is very consistent. This happens on every single project. There is this period after schematic design is done, before the community votes, that allows the building committee to go out and communicate the intent of the design to the community and receive feedback, and that feedback ultimately goes into the final design.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Eversole.
I just want to echo Paula's comment, and that procedurally, that we need as much community involvement before we get to town meeting, because the concept of designing things afterwards, they're going to want to know pretty much everything's going to be as designed as much as possible beforehand. So I would suggest, even if it's an informal proceeding of every month before you submit it to MSB on the schematics, to get another opportunity for people to talk, that's why I think what Paul is talking about, and I would fully support, that there an opportunity to say something, even though it may not change a lot of things that goes on, but you will not have all the information at that time, but you'll have more, and you can get feedback back. I agree that people are going to want to look at what's the bottom line, and that's going to be important, and we get a role in that in designing the borrowing. But the important part is to have feedback well before town meeting, and even before it goes to MSB, so that people feel as if they're involved.
Well, I want to make a comment here, because I think some of the things that the design firm was just said was, because we've been through this in other things. When we talked about regionalization, we had these, and we had big forums, and I'm for forums, and I'm all for public input. But to the point that if you go in and it doesn't look like you've done the legwork and you can't answer the questions because they aren't formed well enough, it looks like you're not prepared, so it becomes counterintuitive and it becomes counterproductive. And I think we have to be able to strike the balance between people having feedback that can be constructive, that people can bring back, and bringing things too soon so you don't have that kind of feedback. And so everybody thinks like, well, that gets done at the next phase, that gets done at this phase. And I think that can turn people against the project, and lose support. And that's what I'm concerned about. Because ultimately, as we've seen just today, this is a very, very comprehensive project that involves not only building a new building, but all coordinating the closings of buildings, coordinating the site work, coordinating the estimates. Every single piece of this has a part that, like the game, has a lot of moving parts. And if you change one thing, it changes other things down the line. So you really got to get a hold of it. And if we look at the slide that's up there, and if the people on TV can put that slide up on the screen, I mean, these are some of the ways people can right now, get involved. And in fact, I would beg people to get involved right now. Go to the websites that you see here. Go to Twitter. Go to Facebook. Contact the school department. Contact the school building committee directly. There is no way right now, there's no reason why you, as a person listening to this right now, or hearing this on a rebroadcast, can't contact with your concerns and your questions right now. We don't necessarily have to wait for a big forum. People are monitoring these, as the superintendent said, and that committee, whoever's monitoring this, will distribute it to the proper person to get the answer. So the time to get involved is now. I'm for the forums. I don't know whether a structured way of doing it when. The last piece I would say is that the MSBA has, whether we like it or not, a very, very strong, assertive stand in this about how things need to go. And as we said, as Mr. Matthews said earlier, we've said in this project all along from the beginning, since 2007, anytime we want to build it on our own, I'm sure the MSBA would be fine with that. But you bear the cost alone. So we have to play by their rules in this whole thing. And I think people want to get answers to their questions, and they want them now because that's the world we live in. But there's a whole constructive process that we have to go through, and that everybody's gone through. It's not like we're singled out. As was said before, the MSBA has done this with every other building process that they've done around the Commonwealth. So please give us your feedback.
And I would add that the school building committee meetings are all public, open. Come on down. They've been open, since we started. People can be heard immediately. Our next meeting.
Which is?
I don't remember. When's our next meeting?
I have to look at the calendar.
I think it's the 28th.
I think it's the 28th.
28th, and that's going to be, is it going to be here, or is it going to be at
TCP right now.
TC Passios, room 13?
I don't disagree with anything that's been said by either member, and I understand that the MSBA has a protocol that we have to follow and that they have a lot of say, but ultimately it's going to be up to the voters of this town whether or not they're going to move forward with this project. And we have learned in the past that without public involvement and without as much public forums as we can and as much information as we can get to the public, we're not going to succeed. And with this project, it's critical that we do succeed. So again, I would echo, we're looking at August 14th, the schematic design plans go to the cost estimators, and then they're expected to come back on 9/5. Well, we move forward with submitting that schematic estimate to MSBA on September 19th. And my concern is, where is the public on that schematic design before it goes to the MSBA? And I just want to say again, I'm not against this project. I fully support it. I have some concerns, which I've talked about, but I don't want to be in a situation where it doesn't go forward because these questions get asked too late in the game, or those public concerns are heard too late in the game. I do understand that there are the ability to follow it electronically, and I was very pleased to see the Facebook page that came up recently, and actually as of tonight there were already comments and questions. So I think people are interested in this project and they are asking questions, but I also think a public forum in which the individuals who can answer those questions are there and the public feels that they're being heard is a very good venue. It's a very good venue to get the information out and to give the public participation, and I would just urge that we schedule those, within this timeline quickly.
Okay, so the first question is going to be, how much is it going to cost? So we're going to get that.
Not till November.
After it's gone to the MSBA.
November 20th.
No, we'll have an estimate back and a budget prepared.
I'm going to ask again, I'm going to ask to come to the mic, because people at home can't hear you.
The budget is going to be submitted to the MSBA on the 3rd of October. So at that point, the numbers will be fully developed. So the first week in October, there will be a budget, because that's a requirement of the submission to the MSBA.
And my only comment is we send out the schematic design plans to the cost estimators in August, on August 14th. We get the schematic design package to MSBA in October. I think it's critical that in that window, we hear from the public as to concerns that they have regarding the schematic design and/or the costs. The only concern that I have is, as was stated, once the schematic design is submitted, you can make minor modifications, but you can't make major changes. And I just think that getting that involvement within that 2-month window is going to be critical. And when we submit the schematic design estimate to MSBA in September, if things change drastically, and I'm not necessarily anticipating this, but I just want to make sure that we allow the opportunity to make changes in that 2-month period, should they become apparent from the public involvement that there are certain components that the public has issues with or concerns with that are going to necessitate changes. I don't want to find that out after we submit it in October. That's all I'm saying.
And Mr. Chairman, one other thing that it's a separate committee, the Building Reuse Committee. The plans show the TCP still there. It's not part of this project. If it is reused, we have issues of parking and whatever things go on. So I'm assuming the Building Reuse Committee is investigating that part as well. The existing parking spaces mirror what is there now, which is good. But if we reuse TCP, then there's some other issues. That'll be another part of this mosaic of questions that need to be addressed by town meeting. And we need to bring the message to the voters and not have the voters necessarily come to us. At the same time, we have to deal with people who don't have Facebook. So we have to look at communicating in all different ways, which I know you're already starting to do, but we just have to do it on a regular basis, even if we don't have all the information.
As chairman of the Building Reuse Committee is very much aware of all the questions. It's the answers that are difficult. But their sessions are also open, and I welcome input from the community in those sessions as well.
Excellent. I want to thank you for coming here and presenting this to us. Obviously, it's probably one of the highest priority items on the town agenda that will have a big impact in so many aspects of our town life and budget. So thank you, all of you, for coming here and taking your time and presenting it, and we look forward to hearing back from you on progress, and we'll follow you on these social media.
Just to go back to hearing back, we had some questions about enrollment, and we may have resolved it, and I don't recall. So we're going to have a work session. We're going to couple that work session with our policies and procedures. Is that the plan for next week?
Assuming,
follow up on
I think
the
our
enrollment
agenda
numbers.
Right. I assume our agenda should have something held for the school discussion, with the idea that if we need to have another meeting, we always could. So.
Okay.
It sounded like the concern was that the developments we project were submitted by the planning board as being longer out than you think they're going to be now.
That's one of the concerns. The other concern is the projected enrollment for both Emerald Place and Tri-Town, given the fact that we've already met or exceeded those projected enrollments.
I don't think that's true. We need to verify that.
Well, that's the question. I'm only going by what the superintendent said, which was the projected enrollment. So I'm only going by the information that was presented.
Correct information. And I just want to say once again that the projected enrollments I was talking about were the planning board projected enrollments.
I understand that.
Not MSBA's. They didn't even ask what locally we had projected.
And I understand that, and that's one of my biggest concerns, is we're already, if those are in fact, and I understand the question, Mr. Matthews, if those are in fact the projected enrollments associated with those developments, Neither development is at 100% build-out, and we've already met or exceeded them.
And if, then that's a huge statement you're making based on information that we have not verified.
And
All right, I want to stop this because this is just going around. We want to verify what the projections were that was submitted to them and make sure that they were accurate from the planning board. That is my understanding. Am I not correct in that?
Yes.
I am not correct?
You are not correct in that.
I'm
you are
sure no
correct.
matter what I'm saying, I'm not correct in this.
We want to make sure that the projections are based on what's built as opposed to what's projected to be built eventually. We want to make sure we're on the same.
Okay.
We have the same scale. Because it
Fair
could have a
And if the
substantially
scale
different-
was incorrect, if in fact the projected numbers were based on full build-out and we've met or exceeded, then we need to get new projections and incorporate those into the model.
Right.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
We agree.
Yes, we do. We're just going
By
about it a
golly.
different way.
I won't even say what time this next appointment was for, but we have change of manager at B&H Corporation, doing business as Mickey Shays, 324 Electric Avenue.
So as the applicant is making his way up to the podium, I did want to mention that the application for change of manager is complete in its form and is included in your packet.
Okay. So, part of the form for the change of manager is that we're going from the last approved manager to the new requested manager.
Correct.
Okay,
My daughter,
so-
Lindsay Itchilla.
Sure. So my one question is, when did the last approved manager stop working for you? Just so we know.
2010.
Okay, so, and you are aware, and the reason I asked that is because of that answer, leads to my next question, that this is potentially 3 years later.
Correct.
Okay.
How did we get there? Is that?
That is not a question for tonight.
Okay.
That will be a question for another night, which will happen. Tonight is just the change of manager. The answer to that question, or your explanation to how we got here, will be probably at a different venue than tonight. Can you introduce the requested new manager, please?
I'm Lindsay Achilla, Mickey's daughter.
Okay. And you are running or managing Mickey Shays?
Yep.
As of tonight? Or
As of tonight, yes.
Okay. And you have any training in running?
I've been working for my father since as long as I can remember. I started bussing tables
Okay.
when I was 13, and then about 18, 19, I moved up to bartending, and I have been working for him ever since.
Okay. You have all the necessary paperwork, correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Anybody have any questions strictly concerning the change in manager?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ebersol.
Question for the town manager, and it somewhat relates to any, I know that the manager had to submit a query request. Who actually reviews the query? Because somebody may have a minor infraction on their query and not affecting the specific, but I was wondering who actually does that review.
In the Board of Selectmen's office, both Linda Douglas and I are certified to run queries, and it just depends on either she or I do it, depending upon availability. And we only ever report back to you if there is a record that is found.
Okay.
So typically, and it's sort of confusing, we include it in the packet. A lot of times it'll come back, it'll say no query available. That means there's no record. Not that that they couldn't find the person. And I believe that is the case in this particular instance.
Thank you. I didn't think there was an issue, but I just wanted to find out how we actually reviewed them.
Any other questions for either of the applicant or the proposed or the requested new manager?
Have you gone through the required training?
Yes, I did. I just went through it last Wednesday. I had to get recertified. It was a 45-minute to an hour course. I passed it with flying colors.
Is that the TIPS course?
Yes. There are also other courses that are available that I'm looking into taking. One is crowd management. There's a couple other things that I'm actually speaking to Raquel about right now.
Okay. Any other questions? Then I would entertain a motion on the change of manager at B&H Corporation doing business at Mickey Shea's 324 Electric Ave.
I would make a motion to approve the change of manager as requested.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? None. So it is unanimous. I just wanted to advise both of you that, well, especially the owner, that because of this lapse in manager of 3 years, during which case there were subsequent renewal licenses where that manager's name was on the applications, we will be holding, and you will be receiving in the mail, a public hearing about this issue. That will all be properly formatted, and you will receive that in the mail in the proper way as required by law and under the licensing of the state, just so you were aware and that it is not a surprise to you. At that point, we'll be investigating and having a public hearing on why that, as you asked to offer, or you offered, I should say, how we got there. That's what we will be asking. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Thanks.
And if you can just open the door, leave the door open when you go out? Sure. Thank you.
Okay, renewal of base license for Lakeview Driving Range.
Okay, so this was on the agenda for last week, and there were a couple of questions that were asked about this. Base licenses are issued for general operation of establishments such as bowling alleys, golf driving ranges, drive-in theaters, and amusement theaters, and they're authorized under Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 181. One of the questions that was asked is, why is this on a different schedule other than the traditional calendar year? And just going back and looking in the file, this license originally was for Whalen Park, and I think the April or the May 1 to April 30 schedule coincided with whatever their season was at the time that they were open. So there isn't any reason that this can't be on a calendar year, but I think just for convenience of one of the original applicants, that's what we did. I think with this particular one, we do have it set to go May 1st, 13 through April 30, 2014. I think you could just as easily put it back on the calendar year. I mean, even though this operation is seasonal as well, it's really not going to impact his operation. So I think if you want to put it on calendar, go ahead. Unfortunately, we didn't type it up that way, but we certainly can do that. And then in terms of an application, when we do renewals of these types of licenses, we don't have them fill out an application. And you'll see when we do all of those annuals, we don't have them do that.
Well, I, for one, just to make it easy for the rest of the license renewals, would like it to be put back on the calendar year. The calendar year for a driving range is basically covered in the whole year anyway, so I mean, not going to open until April sometime and probably closes depending on the weather, November or December if you get a really good year.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that with the idea that if we approve this license and then have the applicant apply again in December, and we prorate the fee for that portion so that when we make them get on our schedule, they're not paying additional funds.
I was going to make the same suggestion.
Okay, we can do that.
I think, okay.
So it has to be
Figure it out.
retyped, so we can't sign it tonight, but we can vote on it tonight.
Or we could approve this one and then just have them reapply in December for the next year's license, and it'll overlap.
Oh, I wrote all over it already.
Oh, you did?
We'll just wait till next.
Sorry.
Right, we'll just wait till next week to get the final one. I mean, these are, yeah.
Okay.
They don't have holographic projections on them. We can reprint it.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the license as it exists.
Second. A little discussion. Just historically, a lot of these licenses were put into place as a way to regulate, we'll go back to River City, pool halls. And it was a way to make sure that the town was making sure that the entertainment was appropriate for the community. So this is sort of a throwback to the 1800s, but it continues on as a way to make sure that people are doing their business in a way that we would like
I thought
them
you were going to go full-blown Music Man on us.
I was mayor of River City in high school, but I'm not now.
Can I take back my motion?
No. We had a second. You seconded it, correct, Bob? Okay. So, any further discussion? All those. Oh, sorry.
I just want to be clear on the motion. You said as it exists. I want to be clear. This is until the end of the calendar year with the expectation.
Right. This is through December 31st of this year.
Okay, I thought we were going the other direction. I
No,
I
we're gonna-
apologize. I'll modify that then.
Okay.
Okay, through the end of the year.
And it will be prorated in
The next.
the next.
And you will second that motion.
Yes.
Okay. So, now that we know what we're voting on, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It is unanimous. Unitil rate case.
Okay, so we did go through the basics of the rate case at either the last meeting or one prior. There was a request to look at whether or not the town should file as an intervener. And filing as an intervener means that we are an official party to the process. We receive all of the official notifications and either written or notification of meetings. We did that with their last rate case because of the issue that we had with the 2011 storm. Unfortunately, yesterday was the last day to file as an intervener. I did talk to the hearings officer and asked her about the possibility of holding that open, and she said, well, in order to ask for an extension, you have to file a petition to ask for an extension. And I said, well, it's probably likely. I asked who else had filed as an intervener, and the Attorney General has filed, the Department of Energy, DOER has filed, and there's an advocacy agency that files on behalf of low-income ratepayers. So those three typically file, and they typically are representing 100% of the interests of all of the other parties. None of the other communities within the service area have filed. That last rate case that we filed, we were the only official intervener. Others participated, the city of Fitchburg participated, but they weren't an official intervener. So we do have the opportunity to participate in the process. We have to be a little more active if we're interested in doing that. The last time we did this, we had town council follow the process, and it's pretty cumbersome. There's a lot of paperwork that comes through, and we spent thousands of dollars. I want to say at least $5,000 of town council's time just following the process, and it really was pretty much a duplicate of what one of those three agencies were doing.
Right. So that was my first question, would be how much it cost us last time and how much it would cost. So with that in mind, and as there's no, from my point of view, no compelling reason to be an intervener at this particular point. Last time it was because of the after effects of the ice storm and their performance or lack of performance during that event. I would probably opt not to be an intervener. We still have access to all the documents because they're all public record from the DPU. So as one person, I don't see any great advantage we get by being an intervener.
I don't either.
Agreed.
I guess I'm disappointed that we don't have a way to automatically get the information, even if I agree we shouldn't be spending the $5,000 for town council, but I would have hoped that there would have been a way that we could have automatically got the information instead of having to go to the website. So I don't think it makes sense to file a request for an extension or anything else like that, but I guess in the future, if we have the opportunity to sign up and get the notices as an intervener and then just forward it on to us, then that was information that I think would be useful, because frankly, I don't have a lot of trust in Unitil to be forthright on their rate process.
No, I agree with that, and I do remember last time that we had town council go through them because the amount of correspondence on the rate case is voluminous.
Yep.
And, you know, it would be, if they had to forward it to us, eventually you'd get tired of looking at it because not being familiar with the process. There's just so much documentation and so much paperwork that it's really hard to sift out what the important parts are and not.
And I guess I would note that, you know, similar to the way we're pushing for hearings for the school, there is a hearing on September 23rd at Fitchburg Memorial Middle School. So for those who are interested, should go.
What is it? I didn't even...
September 23rd at 7 p.m.
Right, okay.
And I believe and I could be wrong, I believe when we filed as an intervener, we did have an opportunity to provide testimony as part of the process, and I think it's unfortunate that we don't have that opportunity. So I do think it's going to be important moving forward through the public hearing process that individuals and citizens do comment, and perhaps it may be something we want to consider commenting as a board on, and I would ask that perhaps at a later meeting, that once we have more information about exactly what they're proposing, that we have an opportunity to look at that and perhaps send a letter on behalf of the board, which I know we did in the past case. So I too am disappointed that we don't have an opportunity to file, and whether or not we want to really, I think, is irrelevant given the fact that we missed the deadline.
Well, I think we could. I mean, the point is, if this board wanted to do it, I think there's a way to do it.
I thought I heard that we had to file a petition.
We would have to file a petition.
Right.
So, but I do think it's important that we remain engaged in the process moving forward. And as Mr. Ebersol said, that interested individuals attend that hearing on September 23rd and subsequent ones that are scheduled. And I would just add that we add it to a future agenda.
And I think if we want to your point, Mrs. Bertram, if we wanted to, for that meeting, for that public hearing on September 23rd, we could certainly put together something, and one of us, I mean, if I'm available, I certainly testified at the last one, not testified, but I certainly spoke at the public hearing for the rate case. We can provide whatever testimony and written documentation and written correspondence from this board or from the town that we'd like. I think doing it as an intervener gives it a different status, it doesn't give it more weight, it just gives it a different status and how it's included in the public record.
Right.
So, but yes, I think we need to, I think we as a town and the ratepayers of Lunenburg and the other three communities who are served by Unitil in the Commonwealth should certainly go to that public hearing and provide their own account of whether they believe they should get it or not. So I think officially we're not going to be an intervener.
Carrie, how often do you meet with Unitil? Because you've met with them in July.
I don't have a standing meeting. We did for a couple of years have a standing meeting that was maybe once a quarter, maybe a little bit less than that. I'm in touch with Unitil fairly frequently on issues, but, maybe once a year I might have an official sit-down meeting with them.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion on the Board of Policies. We're going to have the policies meeting next week.
Just before we move on that.
Yes.
There have been a couple of vehicle use policies floating around, and the last ones we saw, I think, were Framingham and Ashland. And I have an old one from Littleton, and I don't know if that was distributed to the new members. But I just want to say personally, I liked it best because it was most in English and less in lawyer. So,
Was that Littleton?
Let me check.
I think you
I
circulated
think
that at
I
our
may
last
have, I may
meeting.
have passed that one out
Yeah.
at the
Haven't you?
meeting over there, so.
okay. All right, so everyone's got
And
it.
that's one, and some of those new distributed policies are ones that we'll talk about on Tuesday. Minutes. Warrants. Payroll in the amount of $468,514.24. Payroll deduction in the amount of $264,444.31. And accounts payable in the amount of $635,380.39. Action file issues. None. Committee reports. Board of Health.
Board of Health does not have anything controversial before them at the moment.
Building Reuse Committee.
Meets Monday evening at 6:30 at TC Passios.
Capital Planning Committee.
Meets tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at the Ritter Building.
Finance Committee.
No report. I was unable to make the meeting.
Library Board of Trustees.
No meeting till next month.
MPO.
No meeting till next month.
Planning Board.
Not a whole lot happened, so given the lateness of the hour, I'm not going to go through everything. Just a couple of highlights. Highfield Village, which I've reported on in the past, was extended to October 21st, 2013. The reason it's being held up is there was a meeting actually tonight with the Sewer Commission relative to the allocation. The IMA, execution of the IMA is holding up the project in getting their allocation. And in addition, MEPA required more information on the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the project. So because of those two issues, the project is being held. What the planning board plans to do is in October meet, get an update on the MEPA review as well as the IMA, and then either move forward with another extension or hopefully the project can move forward. The town manager was there for an A&R on the primary school. It was a paperwork issue that the plan hadn't been signed, and if desired, she can add more to that. The Force Corp, which is a new company, is going to be going forward with a development plan review. That's at 305 Leominster Shirley Road. It's the construction of a 60 by 124 warehouse and a lumber business, so that's going to be moving forward. Road acceptance for Whitetail Crossing, it is hoping to come forward if we have a special fall town meeting with road acceptance. And there is going to be a citizen survey available on master planning on SurveyMonkey, and that's going to happen very quickly. I understand that there was a meeting today with IT, so more information about that will be available on the planning board website, and there will be a link to SurveyMonkey for anyone who's interested in doing it. And we hope that everyone will, because it's really where you see the community going moving forward. And it's data that we need to do a master plan. And Tri-Town, according to the planning director, does not qualify for 40S funding this year. Right.
For fiscal 13.
Fiscal 13 was
I
last year.
can't.
Right, for fiscal 13, not fiscal 14.
Okay, all right.
Well, we went back and forth. I mean, initially, we did not believe that the project qualified for 40S funding in fiscal 13 based on the date of the certificate of occupancy. They were looking back to, we just missed it. And that's the assumption that we had throughout fiscal 13. It was brought to our attention that perhaps it did qualify for 40S in fiscal 13. We went through a process with the Department of Revenue. They agreed to hold open the filing period while we went through this process, and the Department of Revenue, in working with the planning director and the assessor and putting together information, determined that it wasn't eligible in 13, but it will be eligible in 14 But again, they're looking at increased costs associated with the increased student enrollment. That's what you have to demonstrate. It's not, they don't just automatically give you funding for for an increased enrollment. You have to demonstrate that your costs went up because of that increased enrollment associated with that 40R development.
Okay.
It's a bureaucratic impossibility.
And it's really disheartening because one of the, this came up during our discussion of whether or not to adopt this
Right.
40-hour program. And me being the vocal person that I am, had concerns about the cost associated with new students. And the fact that, 40S was held up as, that's going to be offset with this 40S program. And now to find out, as was just identified, there are students coming into the school system associated with this project. And it'd be interesting to know what that criteria is, how you determine the cost escalations. But it's just very upsetting that the community was told that we would be able to offset those costs, and now to find out that there is a bureaucratic process that we may not see that funding is
Supposed to be a payment,
really disheartening.
Payment per student.
Right.
Which
That was the way the program was touted.
Still other benefits to the project being there, but as far as affordable housing and meeting the 10% goal, but still.
Yep.
That is a
Exactly.
component of it.
PAC,
Meets next week.
School Committee.
Met this past Wednesday, kind of did what we just did.
Okay.
And
School Building Committee, same meeting,
You've
right?
got it all, yeah.
There you go. Sewer Commission.
Sewer Commission is meeting the same time as we are tonight, or, well, they were done many hours ago. They
You don't know that for sure.
Well, they may
No,
not,
they were
they may not
clearly
have
done
actually
hours
had their
ago.
meeting. They were looking at a quorum issue, so, but we certainly had some very important topics to deal with tonight. They are continuing to look at extensions. Again, both Dave and I were quoted in the newspaper about the illegal connections, the amnesty program, so that information is getting out there. Lancaster Ave extension is still in progress. There's no connections yet, but that's moving ahead. The Highfield allocation, actually the IMA did not hold them up. They were holding up on the IMA for allocation based on what Highfields needed to allocate, so the fingers keep getting pointed different ways. So, because we needed to make sure that the IMA had the proper number in there, including Highfields. So, they are in the process of doing their normal work as well.
Thank you. And Mass Broadband, nothing new this week.
While we're on committee updates, with PAC, it's not really a committee update, but as evidenced by last Wednesday, there was supposed to be a televised meeting, staffing, there was some kind of snafu, it wasn't televised. That has happened in the past. PAC is appointed by this board, and this board has no reporting other than as a liaison, as to what's going on with PAC. So, we have issues with getting that committee fully staffed so they can do more things that they want to do. There's a built-in term limit on their people serving on that committee. So we really need to be building up the folks who are involved in that. We have no reports on budgets and how money's being spent. And that all should be coming through this committee. And I think we need to either have a joint meeting with them to get full updates and understanding on what the long-term plan is and how things are going. And then we need to see where we're at.
I couldn't agree more. I think that we need to set up a meeting where we have a joint meeting, a joint workshop meeting with them, where we all, in preparation of that, review the bylaw that established them and what they are required to do and how they are required to do it. And one of the things I think probably most pressing, as what happened on Wednesday, is there has to be an accountability of who is responsible, for scheduling it. How does the scheduling happen? How does somebody request scheduling? Now, this was a normally scheduled meeting, so this should have been taken care of automatically. But you're right, in an age where people really do rely on watching the meetings on TV to get their information, we cannot have meetings that are not televised. There will be, I'm sure, emergency circumstances sometimes, but I haven't heard one, and we do need to know all those things that you mentioned, Ms. Matthews. I couldn't agree more. So if we can set up a meeting with them, if we can have Linda send them a letter saying,
We can do that.
yep, offer a few times.
And since their regularly scheduled meetings now are on Tuesday, that theoretically we could have a joint meeting here.
Right, so theoretically, they don't have regularly scheduled meetings, that's the problem.
Right.
But they just happen to be when you're here now.
Pure coincidence.
Town manager reports.
I just have one item that I wanted to report on, a follow-up on the capital projects for the current fiscal year. I had mentioned, provided an update on the progress to date, and I had mentioned the library project, that we had budgeted $40,000 for that project. And as our facility staff was looking at putting together the scope of work, they brought in a couple of different contractors to help make sure that we were capturing everything, because when you go over $25,000, we have to go through a full-blown procurement process where we're advertising, and we have to be very detailed with the scope of work. So in going through that process, facilities had reason to believe that we were looking at something substantially less, and we went and requested 3 written quotes on that project. And I did find out earlier today that the lowest bidder, and I believe we will be awarding to this contractor, was about $21,000, so significantly less. And that I haven't even had a chance to notify the director. That came to me first thing this morning, so that's pretty exciting that we will be able to do that project for far less than we had originally expected.
Excellent. We do have an executive session planned, but before then, is there any public comment from the board, final public comment from the board?
The only other question, I couldn't remember on the primary school, there was going to be additional information received from the assessors, or I can't remember what additional information we needed on valuation and...
Yes, you had requested, well, essentially an appraisal. We were going to try to do an in-house appraisal on that, and that's still in process.
Okay.
On which school?
On the old primary
The old
school.
primary school, okay.
Sorry, not the new primary
Right,
school.
that's not the primary school. Like, any public comment from the public? Mr. Daniels, thanks for staying with us the whole evening.
I trust I don't need to introduce myself again. Actually, I was listening to the board about the PAC, and I don't know all the issues there or what's going on. I figured I'm here to volunteer, so if there's an opportunity there and you're interested, I would be interested. My undergraduate degree was in public relations at Suffolk University. I learned about television production there. We did a program on the Cape Cod, philanthropy on the Cape. And I was a producer for that program. And I also saw how Suffolk was able to incorporate in their education public access to television. And I personally would like to see maybe Fitchburg State students be involved in some of this. I don't know what's set up now or how it's set up, but there certainly gave me a lot of ideas being a part of that program that I think could serve the community
I think there's
well.
openings, right?
There are openings.
So all it takes is...
I guess I don't really, I mean, I don't know if there's some kind of description or, you know, when the meetings are or anything like that.
That information to
Okay.
you. I think maybe a year or more ago I asked you about PAC.
It finally sunk in.
I was taking care of two sick,
I know.
very sick people.
I know.
So you want to do it, and they meet on Tuesdays. You available Tuesdays? Apparently you are. I mean, I think we.
I mean, I wasn't expecting a vote or a nomination or anything.
what?
I just want to
Move
put
it
myself
forward.
out there.
Well, we can't do it
because
tonight.
it's not
It wasn't on the agenda.
We can add it to next
We
week.
can add it to next,
can add
can
it
we
to
add it
next
to the
week.
next week's workshop?
Yes,
Because-
we're
because-
going to have an open meeting before the
Okay.
workshop, so yes.
There we go.
And I can actually vote on it because it's not a monetary...
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
May I have your vote?
We'll see.
Okay, no lobbying in the building, please.
Sorry.
Any other public comment from the public? Okay, so We have an executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, and the chair so declares. This is a discussion of the town manager's employment contract renewal.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Mr. Ebersol?
Aye.
Mr. Toll?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram? Aye. And I for myself. Good night, everyone. We will see you for part of a meeting next week before we go to workshop.